These are the 16 most shocking Nazi and war stories ever told on the Joe Rogan podcast. True Nazism. In episode 1006 of the Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson and Bret Weinstein plunge into a deep, uncomfortable, but profoundly insightful discussion about the true nature of Nazism and the insidious ways its underlying pattern can reemerge in society. It's a conversation that utterly shatters any simplistic, comforting narratives about evil. The dialogue kicks off with Bret Weinstein's own undergraduate project on the Holocaust, where he questioned the tendency to dismiss Hitler as simply crazy. This immediately resonates with my own long-held bias. Labeling monstrous figures as crazy feels like an intellectual cop-out, a way to externalize the evil and pretend it couldn't possibly be part of human nature. If Hitler was rational, even monstrously so, it forces a far more unsettling self-reflection.
Maybe it wasn't a tweet. I did see a YouTube clip that somebody tweeted. I don't know if it was you. Your perspective on Hitler, and your argument was that he was actually even far worse than his reputation would lead us to believe. And it's funny. It harkens back to my first evolutionary project. As an undergraduate, I was working with Bob Trivers, who's one of the leading evolutionary minds of the 20th century. I was lucky enough to have him as an undergraduate advisor.
Pull this sucker right up to your face, because you're going to turn sideways because we're looking at each other next
better?
to each other. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I did a project with Bob on analyzing the Holocaust from an evolutionary perspective. I wanted to test the question about whether, at the time it was commonplace for people to say that Hitler was crazy, and there was something that bothered me about that analysis. I think there's something actually dangerous that we dismiss somebody like Hitler as crazy before we understand actually what they're up to. So when I saw your video clip, I thought it would be worth having a discussion so that we could figure out what perspective makes sense.
That sounds like an awesome topic, but before we get to that, I would really like to know what's going on with you. Because you're at the center of this crazy controversy of Evergreen State College. You essentially left the area. You're suing the college now. So where do you stand now?
We have not yet filed suit, and in fact, I can't talk about what took place inside the negotiation, but we had our first sit-down with the college yesterday, and this was an attempt to avert a suit. But I will say, from where I sit, as hard as this is to believe, it appears that the college has learned nothing from this episode, and that it is doubling down on the same foolish sets of beliefs and assumptions that got it into trouble in the first place. So that is not a hopeful situation.
This discomfort intensifies when Bret reveals his ongoing battle with Evergreen State College at that time, which was about 8 years ago. When he mentions Evergreen State University,
it's not aware of what this whole story is about, you would either have to go back to Bret's podcast that we did a few months back, or please just Google Evergreen State University and Google Bret, and you will be blown away by the insanity. It's social justice warrior gone amok. The whole campus, kids patrolling the campus with baseball bats. I mean, the whole thing is just completely bananas. The president of the university being told by the children not to use his hands when he's speaking because it's a microaggression. So he puts his hands down. The children start cheering and laughing. They don't realize they're being played. The whole thing is just some crazy grand game by the children. And I'm calling them children. I don't give a fuck how old they are. To have power over people. I mean, that's essentially what this is all boiling down to. And you really see it in that moment where they tell him to put his hands down. And he does, and they laugh and cheer and think it's amazing.
Well, they're educated to do that to some degree, because one of the tenets of the postmodernism that they're being spoon-fed is that there's nothing but power. That's the only thing that mediates relationships between people. Because there's no real world. Everything's a social construct. And it's a landscape of conflict between groups. That's the postmodern world. And the only actual means of expression is power. That's why the postmodernists make the claim constantly that the patriarchy is a corrupt institution, because they look at hierarchical organizations, and they're stratified, obviously. There's people at the top and people at the bottom. The only reason that there are people at the top is because they dominate by power. There's no philosophy of authority or competence. That's all gone. And so And if you're cynical about that sort of thing, and you should be, you might say that part of the reason that the only thing that the postmodernists believe in is power is because that helps them justify their arbitrary use of it under any circumstances whatsoever. And I think that's right. I think that's exactly what happens. So it's not surprising that you see this manifested in the mob-like behavior of the students. It's right in accordance with everything they're being taught. So...
Well, they're also being taught in this sort of any means necessary to get over the establishment. Like, the establishment is this horrible institution, and they could justify pretty much anything.
Yes.
This is what, like, punch a Nazi. Who's a Nazi? Everybody that doesn't agree with you. I mean, it's essentially what's being said ad nauseum in social justice warrior circles online, and you see, I've seen punch a Nazi so many times. I mean, but when it came down to Charlottesville, there was very little punching of Nazis. You know, the whole thing was like, it's all very insane. When you see real Nazis, like, those are real Nazis. You know, like, Go fucking punch them, please. You know,
well, we've also, I think,
and don't even do that.
Logically, my opinion here leans heavily into outright frustration. This kind of ideology, rigidly and mob-like behavior, which reduces complex human interaction to pure power dynamics, isn't just absurd. It creates an environment ripe for intellectual dishonesty and, as the discussion suggests, can fuel the very polarization that allows dangerous ideas to fester. Peterson then brings up his own experience of being targeted with the Nazi epithet, highlighting the casual and often misguided use of the term. He points out the stark hypocrisy of how the swastika is an immediate identifier of a pathological personality, leading to cancellations, while the hammer and sickle, a murderous symbol responsible for vastly more deaths, is largely ignored by mainstream media. This is a point I feel strongly about. The intellectual laziness and moral relativism inherent in these double standards are not only infuriating, but dangerous. If we can't accurately identify and condemn all sources of historical evil, we lose our compass.
We were targeted immediately afterward with the Nazi epithet, and Ryerson shut down the free speech panel. So it's coming up again in November 11th.
How were you targeted as? You were targeted as Nazis?
Yeah. What happened was this person put up a Facebook page and used a swastika with a a circle with a line through it, and said no fascists at Ryerson, essentially. But she used the swastika, and she got a bunch of people rallied together to pressure the university administration into canceling the event, which they promptly did. And then they had a celebration party the night of the event. And here's something that was really interesting. So they got a couple of hundred people out to the celebration at Ryerson, and they were united under the banner of the hammer and sickle and were calling for revolution. And what was so interesting about that, and I really mean technically that it was interesting, was that the mainstream media said virtually nothing about the fact that these, let's call them counter-protesters, I don't know exactly how you'd term them, had come out under this murderous symbol. And it's made me think, like, I can't figure out why the swastika is an immediate identifier of a pathological personality, and the hammer and sickle isn't. There's actually a reason. It isn't just arbitrary. And I think maybe it's something like the Nazi is the guy who knifes you in the alley and steals your wallet, and the communist is the white-collar criminal who takes your pension. And you're actually more afraid of the first person than the second person, because the damage they do is more proximal and emotionally recognizable. But the second guy who takes your pension, for example, he's perhaps even more dangerous. But there's a bloodiness about the Nazi symbol and an immediate emotional impact that the hammer and sickle just doesn't produce. And some of that's because people are badly educated historically.
I think that's it. I think it's pure ignorance.
Well, I don't think it's just ignorance. No,
do you think that the people that are wearing those Che Guevara t-shirts really understand the history of Che Guevara, or do you think he represents this sexy South American counter-protest character, a guy who stands up to the establishment as we know it, a guy who's wearing a green beret, wearing a beret, hiding in the jungle, fighting against the oppressive dictatorship of America? I mean, that's what they're looking at when they see that image.
Well, the fact that historical ignorance plays a role in this is absolutely certain, and I think the romanticization of people like Che Guevara is exactly. I think you nailed that exactly. But I do think there's a deeper question here. It's like, I was thinking, in the aftermath of Charlottesville, many conservatives immediately divorced themselves from the Nazis. Ben Shapiro was a good example, right?
Yeah.
And it was very much reminiscent of William F. Buckley divorcing himself from the John Birch Society back in the 1960s. The right wing seems to be easier for the right wing to draw a line around the Nazis and say, no, that's not us. Partly because the right wingers, conservatives, are better at drawing boundaries. But, let's say we wanted to draw a boundary around the radical leftists. Okay, point to something. Well, on the right, you say, well, you wore a swastika. Yeah, you're out of the club, man.
Right.
On the left, well, you believe, what's the smoking pistol? You believe in equity? It's like that's a smoking pistol as far as I'm concerned, but it doesn't have the same emotional punch as you wore a swastika to the...
But the most chilling and arguably the most important part of the conversation is Peterson's assertion that the Nazi is us, and that the correct response to pondering if you could have been a concentration camp guard in 1930s Germany isn't, no, those people are unlike me, but rather, those people were human and I'm also human. This is about acknowledging that the potential for such horrifying behavior is a latent program within our biological possibilities, constantly lurking. Opioid war? In episode 2183 of the Joe Rogan Experience, Norman Ohler completely blows the lid off what most of us thought we knew about Nazi Germany, revealing a history deeply steeped in drug use, specifically stimulants and opioids. Honestly, it's mind-boggling that his book, Blitzed, was the first to widely expose this in 2015. It just goes to show how effectively a regime can construct a facade of law and order and a pure movement while operating on a foundation of chemical dependency. My initial thought was, how did we not know this sooner?
I mean, the Nazis were really into meth, basically. They were the first ones to understand that methamphetamine can change the war effort. They basically doped their soldiers. So that was an interesting story that I told in Blitz, and also I spoke about Hitler's consumption, which is quite outrageous, actually. And while I was doing the research, I was in many archives because I'm not a historian. I usually write novels. I started out writing 3 novels, and then suddenly I became a nonfiction writer. I was trying to understand what does that mean, and I thought it meant to do historical writing to actually go into archives and look at original documents and not just lean on other books, which is what many historians actually do, which I found out later. They just read books from colleagues and then make up their own shit. But to actually go into the archive is very time-consuming, but I thought everyone does that. Actually, no one does that. So I was looking at all the archives, and at one point I was in the archive of the memorial of the concentration camp of Dachau, so a very serious archive, because they host like all the documents, what the SS did in Dachau, and so it's an intense experience to go to that archive and actually look at, because they wrote down everything, like every experiment the Nazis did in concentration camps was like written down because it was like pseudoscience. So I found documents while I was researching Blitz relating to tests with psychoactive substances. And that was not what I expected, because the Nazis had been, enthusiastic about methamphetamine, but that was the first time I saw like something that related Nazis and psychedelics. And I thought that's quite strange. That's quite interesting, obviously. I need to get to the bottom of this. So I asked the archivist, can I see like all the documents? What did the SS actually do with psychedelics? Which ones did they use? Why did they test them? What were they looking for? And he said, well, I'm very sorry, but all documents are in America, because when American military liberated Dachau, one of the things they do is they take a lot of documents, and they took all the psychedelic research done by the Nazis with them. So I knew I had to go to America, probably to the National Archives in College Park, close to Washington, biggest archive in the world, find it there. But I didn't have time while I was doing Blitzed. And Blitzed was also already a complete story. So I thought I saved that psychedelic theme for another book. And this other book is now being published.
The revelation that methamphetamine, or Pervitin, was an everyday substance in Nazi Germany is genuinely unsettling. Imagine a society where you could just pick up meth at a pharmacy. No prescription needed, even children could. It was peddled as a performance-enhancing miracle, boosting everything from work output to sexual drive. The military's adoption of it, championed by Professor Ronka, feels like something out of a dystopian novel. His chilling rationale was that meth not only kept soldiers awake, but also made them a little bit dumber, which he deemed perfect for the German soldier, who merely needed to follow orders and keep shooting. that grotesque pragmatism is truly disturbing.
So the Nazis knew about mescaline, and the Nazis wanted to find a truth drug. Hitler was a paranoid person. He always thought, and it's actually true, that people are conspiring against him. There were quite a lot of assassination attempts on his life. He survived them all. But there were a lot of people who didn't like him. I mean, Germany was a totalitarian dictatorship, and most people supported Hitler, but there were also people who did not. You know, there were people in the resistance, even within, you know, the army, who thought he was an idiot. High-ranking officers who were a bit more brilliant than him and who knew that he was running things to the ground. So he gave the order to find a truth drug. Like, it's the wet dream of intelligence. You give someone a substance, and then you can control that person.
Right.
You can extract secrets from that person. You can kind of you can control a person. And the Nazis, the SS, even with their torture methods, had been unable to extract all the secrets they wanted to extract from prisoners. Especially Polish resistance fighters had been very resistant even against SS torture. Like, they wouldn't say, I got the job from the British intelligence or what. You know, they just wouldn't talk even when you tortured them. So Hitler wanted the drug that would solve this problem. And one man that was put in charge with this is a chemist called Richard Kuhn, who actually received the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. He was a brilliant mind, but he was a Nazi, so he didn't, like many scientists left Germany, or writers left. Thomas Mann left Germany when the Nazis took power. But some people stayed, some writers stayed, some scientists stayed. And this Kuhn actually became, you know, he's really working for Hitler. He was developing a nerve poison, sarin, which was deadly for Hitler. And if you worked for Hitler as a scientist, obviously you got all the grants you need, the money you needed. You were, you had a great time, basically, if you sold your soul to the devil. So Richard Kuhn was in charge with finding the truth drug, and then the interesting thing is, because I was in the Novartis archive of Sandoz, because I wanted to find the link between a Swiss pharmaceutical company who develops LSD and then the SS who tests it in Dachau. Like, how did the SS know? Like, and did they really test LSD also in Dachau, or was it just mescaline? Because they write in the reports that I then found in the US, mescaline and another odorless, colorless substance was being used. Mm. And LSD is that famous odorless, colorless substance. Like, I could put a drop of LSD in your coffee, you wouldn't even notice it. Right. Which is good for intelligence service. You want to dose someone without that person knowing it. So LSD was kind of perfect. But how did the Nazis, did they actually know about LSD? Was it LSD? That was kind of what I wanted to find out. And when I was in the archive of Sandoz, I wanted to find like papers, like did they sell LSD to the SS? I was curious to find something. And the archivist, he was very skeptical of me because he sensed that I was onto something. Like, he was protecting basically the archive, because the archive at Sandoz is not a public archive. If you go to the National Archives of the United States or the Federal Archive of Germany, it's a public archive. The archivists want you to find the information. They will reveal like the find book, which has it's a database. It shows you everything that's in the archive. So it takes sometimes days or weeks to actually figure out what's all there, but you have theoretically an overview of everything that's in the.
But the real shocker for me is how central Pervitin was to the Blitzkrieg. The sheer scale, 35 million dosages ordered for the invasion of France, paints a terrifying picture of a drug-fueled war machine. It makes you question how much of that rapid, terrifying efficiency was strategic genius, and how much was simply an army of exhausted, hyper-aggressive, meth-addled soldiers steamrolling a drowsy, wine-drinking French force. The image of Rommel, described as totally high on meth, blazing through a sleeping French village, completely shatters the myth of Aryan purity and willpower, replacing it with a far more mundane yet horrifying chemical dependency.
And their weapons were not as good. For example, their tanks were not as good as the British tanks. So it was basically there was a lot of doubt that this madman plan by these three young revolutionary generals and Hitler supporting this madman plan would actually work. But then Ranke thought, this is my calling now, this is my hour. And he presented his findings that actually you don't need to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. On meth, it's possible. If you give enough meth to a person, you can stay awake for 5 days. So suddenly his findings became very interesting. He was invited to the high command. He was giving lectures. He wrote a so-called stimulant decree. I don't know if we want to see that. I found that also in the archive in Freiburg. It was the first official paper by an army where the soldiers were basically invited or ordered, or it was suggested to them to take a powerful, synthetic stimulant, this is the stimulant decree. It says, for example, this was distributed to all the medical officers, so they knew, how to use the meth. So, for example, it says what you could give if someone took too much, like then you give like a sleeping pill. It also says, it's quite interesting, what are the side effects, and the side effects are aggression. So that was like a desired side effect, you know. So Ranke was suddenly very popular. He was on top of the world. There's another paper I found which shows how many dosages then the German army ordered from the Temmler company just before they attacked France, and this is 35 million dosages. So finding that document was also kind of fun. Yeah,
35 million.
Yeah.
And so were they on a large dose of this when the soldiers?
Well, it's interesting then to see how those 35 million dosages were being used, because they were used asymmetrical. They were handed out especially to the tank troops, because the tanks were at the forefront, and these tanks could not stop. So everyone in these tanks was basically high on crystal meth, like all the way through the advance. And there's reports by the French army that they simply could not understand their opponent anymore. Like they didn't sleep. They just chased through. They behaved like madmen, basically. Rommel was seen at one point totally high on meth, like standing in the tank, like the lid was open. He was standing there, and they were racing at night through a French village where the French army had camped because they needed to sleep. Because it's kind of, I guess, funny. I don't know if funny is the right word, but France also had sort of, not a stimulant decree, but they had the rule that in a war situation, and this had been beneficial in World War I, each French soldier has the right to drink 3/4 of a liter of red wine per day. So when France was attacked by Germany, I think it was 17,000 trucks with red wine drove from the French wine regions to the front lines and distributed the red wine. So the French guys were like drinking red wine, which is a mood enhancer, but it does make you tired, especially 3/4 of a liter. So the Germans were methed up, and the French were like kind of drowsy. So that scene with Rommel I described, he's standing in the open lid of the tank going through this village at night, and left and right are kind of the French soldiers kind of sleeping basically, and he just fires with the tank left and right, and he runs over people, and he's like a complete madman.
When stimulant decree is mentioned, then there's Hitler himself, whose meticulously kept medical notes by his personal physician Theodor Morell was a largely untouched historical goldmine. To learn that Hitler transitioned from mere vitamins to powerful opioids like Dolotin and Eucadol, oxycodone, the very same drug that later fueled America's opioid crisis, is a stunning revelation.
And Hitler was complaining of bloating problems. He always was like, he had digestion problems. And Morell, who was like an alternative doctor, gave him like vitamins and a probiotic, which was also new at the time. And Hitler was cured, and he appointed Morell as his personal physician, and they became kind of best friends. They were like, Hitler spent more time with Morell than with anyone else, all the way up to the end. So Morell's notes are very interesting to study, because he was like one of these German nerds that wrote everything down. And I went to another federal archive in Germany, and I checked out all the papers of Morell, and I could see that basically no one had looked at these papers. Like, Hitler's the most examined person in the world. Like, the most literature about one person is actually about Hitler, but no one I mean, the last time someone checked out these notes, I could see it in the record of the archive, was like in 1986, and then someone in 1961. So like I was like the fourth person to look at this. So it's kind of crazy, because Morell describes like in detail like what he gives to Hitler, and that's why I'm a little bit surprised by this famous video of him. Like, I think maybe it's a fake, I don't know, because in 36, up until from 36 when they met, and Morell was with him at the Olympic Games, until 41, basically Hitler only received vitamins. Vitamin C, vitamin B1, and sometimes glucose, like sugar, was injected into. Maybe he was on a sugar rush, because sugar is a strong drug. Really? Because sugar immediately kicks, in the brain. So, but there was no like heavy substances in 36. Not that, Morell wrote everything down, so I don't think he would,
The idea that the charismatic leader, the architect of unimaginable horrors, was often just a junkie, speedballing cocaine and oxycodone, making very crazy decisions, completely recontextualizes his final years. The dark irony that British intelligence preferred him fucked up because his drug-induced state made him a less effective enemy is almost unbelievable. Operation Paperclip. In episode 1299 of the Joe Rogan Experience, Annie Jacobsen dives deep into the unsettling realities between government secrecy and what she reveals about Nazis and their post-World War II involvement with the United States is absolutely jaw-dropping. It's a stark reminder that history is rarely as clean-cut as textbooks often portray it. Jacobsen exposes Operation Paperclip, a clandestine program where, after World War II, the U.S. brought over more than 1,000 Nazi scientists to prevent them from falling into Soviet hands. Honestly, my first thought was, how could we do that? But the rationale, as she explains, was chillingly pragmatic. The U.S. needed to beat Stalin at his black propaganda campaign and maintain pole position in the global power game. The fear was palpable. If we didn't get these brilliant, albeit horrific minds, the Russians would. It makes you question where the line is drawn when national security is perceived to be at stake.
We were talking about Nazis,
Paperclip,
right?
Yeah, yes.
I mean, I wrote a book about Operation Paperclip, and my God, talk about a rabbit's hole.
That's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole.
Let's explain to people that don't know what we're talking about. Operation Paperclip was when, after World War II, the United States gathered up a ton of scientists from Nazi Germany, brought them over to America, and even Wernher von Braun. They had Wernher von Braun run NASA. He was a Nazi, like 100% Nazi.
Good friends with Hitler type Nazi.
Yes, he ran a Berlin rocket factory where they hung the 5 slowest Jews. They would hang them out front so everybody would know, like, this is what happens when you work slow. We'll hang you. I mean, the Simon Wiesenthal Center said that if Wernher von Braun was alive today, they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity.
Yes, they would.
And that was the head of NASA. That was the head of NASA. That was the guy who got us to the moon. That was the big cheese guy. Yeah. So we were willing to put a lot of really dark things aside in order to gather up the best scientists so that the Soviet Union couldn't get them all. And they got a few of them as well. But we got how many? More than 1,000, right?
Allegedly 1,400, but I would not be surprised if, the story changes and there were more, right?
Yeah.
But that goes back to our discussion earlier about being in pole position. I mean, that's why we grabbed those Nazis. We were like, if we don't get them, the Russians will.
I get it. And, and I'm sure the Nazis could say, I didn't want to do it. They made me. I'm a nice person. I love Jews.
Well, that was part of the mythology. It was like, we got the good Germans. Well, no, we didn't.
Right.
We got the top Germans, and who do you think the top Germans were?
Yeah.
They were coveted by Hitler, Himmler, Göring,
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were right. I mean, there were guys that we grabbed out of the docks at Nuremberg literally to come be part of our program,
Well, if you're smart, you're an asset, right? I mean, that's what Genghis Khan used to do. He'd take warlords from the other side and capture them and go, listen, just come over here, bro. Come on. Work for me. I'm the man.
I mean, ideology aside, I'm super smart and I want that to be known. That's kind of that's the competitor, right? I mean, you cannot be the best rocket designer in the world and not want those talents, demonstrated. That's Werner von Braun's story. That's the story of all of them. And that was so shocking writing that book, because it's like, wow, huge amounts of talent, but how far will the competitor go to see their baby come to fruition? What are they willing to put aside?
The most disturbing revelation for me concerns figures like Werner von Braun, who became the head of NASA. Jacobsen unequivocally states he was a 100% Nazi, so close to Hitler he was considered a good friend. Can you imagine? The man who led us to the moon also ran a rocket factory where he hung the 5 slowest Jews out front as a gruesome warning. The Simon Wiesenthal Center, she notes, could prosecute him for crimes against humanity if he were alive today. This utterly shatters any illusion of good Germans that might persist. And then there's the dueling scars. Jacobsen points out that many of these Nazi scientists, like Kurt Diebus, von Braun's number 2 at NASA, sported huge facial scars from academic fencing with real swords during their college days, a badge of honor in their ruthless culture. It's a physical, undeniable mark of the ingrained brutality and ideology that permeated their world. My own bias kicks in here. How could anyone look at these men with those grotesque scars and truly believe they were good or simply following orders? It seems almost willfully naive.
The Nazis had rivals amongst themselves, and Schreiber's rival was Dr. Blum, who was in charge of the biological weapons program for Hitler. Okay? And Blum had a son, and Blum was prosecuted at Nuremberg. You can see a picture of him with a big dueling scar. He was a bad dude. He had
a dueling scar?
Dueling scar.
Duel like a sword duel?
Sword fighting. It was like among the Nazis, they would duel with one another when they were younger students, and then they would pack the wound with horsehair to make it even more pronounced, because it looked ferocious.
Really?
Pull up, Jamie. Pull up.
I got a couple. What's his name?
Well, you can pull up Dr. Blum, Bolme, but also
look at that big ass scar on his face.
And also if you pull up Kurt Diebus, who was the director of our JFK Center. He was NASA's von Braun's number 2. He had a huge dueling scar, and yet when there he is right there. Knowing what we know now, it's like, come on, you're trying to tell me that guy's not a hardcore Nazi?
So those guys had dueling scars on their faces.
Yeah, you see him?
How often did they duel?
Well, when they were in college.
Do it to the death?
No. It was like on guard. And then they would
fencing.
Oh,
this guy had it too.
Yep.
How did they not get poked in the eyes?
Oh, I guess that was the gentleman's rules.
How do you listen? You go in for the cheek, you hit the eye, that's happens all the time. I mean, they must have cut a lot of eyeballs out.
I haven't seen any photographs of missing eyeballs, but there's a lot right on the cheek, so maybe that was the whole point. It was actually just a bit for show.
Oh.
Right.
How weird.
But it was
a badge of honor.
It was a badge of honor. Yeah.
There's more.
But
wow, so they all had it on their face.
Yeah.
It's all in the same spot, dueling scars.
Yeah.
Wow.
So imagine,
they wanted to have these scars.
That was
Jesus Christ. Oh, they had goggles on.
Oh, there you go. That's how they didn't take out the
academic
eyeballs.
fencing, it says. Academic fencing. So what they were essentially doing, they were having fencing matches with real swords, not with ones with tips.
Okay.
Wow. And cutting their faces up. Fuck, man. Oh, Jesus, look at this guy's face. Yikes. Wow. Dueling cults. That is crazy.
So when you consider, that people did not know about that, and then you've got these Germans walking around America as part of our space program and our science programs, and, these are the good Germans. I mean, now you really have to say to yourself, come on, guys.
They were all Nazis.
Right?
Big-ass fucking scars on their face.
Absolutely.
Wow. Oof. That's dark, man.
OG Fight Club.
Yeah, right. OG.
Don't talk about Fight Club.
Super OG. Yeah. God, it's crazy.
When Dr. Kurt Diebus is mentioned, Jacobsen further unveils the depths of Nazi depravity through her interview with the son of Dr. Kurt Blum, who led Hitler's biological weapons program. Blum, a highly favored Nazi, ordered the special treatment, euphemism for killing, of 6,000 tubercular Jews. She describes holding his father's Nuremberg trial documents covered in swastikas, a chilling artifact of pure evil.
Hitler gave out these little buttons. Blum's was, I believe, number 6. So that's how favored he was.
Wow.
And his son, Dr. Kurt Blum, whereas the father was in charge of the biological weapons program, so his plan was to, murder people with biological weapons from nature, right? The son had been a medical doctor, but had left the profession to cure people with flowers. It's called Bach flower therapy. So he was this very interesting individual who had never given an interview before, and he agreed to let me come to him. So I go on that journey, I go to his house, and he was remarkable. I mean, he was so interesting. Talk about the sins of the father, I mean, my God, what he had as a burden, right? And I asked him to tell me everything he could about his father, and he did. And then he asked me to tell me what I knew about his father. I had information from the German archives about his father that he did not have.
Like what kind of stuff?
Like that his father had given something. I'd just come from this archive and found these documents. Dr. Blum ordered that 6,000 tubercular Jews be given Sonderbehandlung. That's the German word. What does that mean? Special treatment. There's a euphemism for you. Oof. That was kill those 6,000 tubercular Jews.
When you say tubercular, is that people with tuberculosis?
Yes, they were suffering from tuberculosis. And Dr. Blum worked closely with Himmler, and they just decided to kill them. And, sitting there talking to this man, telling him about his father at his request was remarkable. And then he's telling me what he knows. And then as I'm getting ready to leave, he says to me, I'd like you to have these. And he takes down from his incredible bookshelf. He himself had written 8 books, right? And he takes down these books and he hands them to me. And they're in these wrappers. And I can see that they have Nuremberg nomenclature on them. And what they are is they're his father's documents from his Nuremberg trial. And I'm like, I can't take these. I thought he meant take them back to my hotel room, look at them, and then, bring them back the next morning when we were doing the next interview. And he said, no, I want you to have them. And I was like, I can't have them. And he said, I don't want them, and you should have them. And he gave them to me. So I had this stack. So I was like, on my trip home, it was so perplexing because I threw out all of my clothes. I was like, screw the clothes. I mean, I travel with a carry-on bag, right? So in my carry-on bag, all I have is this Nazi paraphernalia that was
Jesus Christ.
in Germany. That is Dr. Blum's,
the
Deputy Surgeon General of the Third Reich's documents from Nuremberg covered with swastikas.
Oh my God.
I mean, he was acquitted at Nuremberg based on all these documents, okay? And by the way, based on human experiments. And I'm at the airport and I realize suddenly, oh my God, swastikas, like this is illegal.
The lack of remorse from these scientists, as Jacobsen observed, is another deeply unsettling detail. It makes me wonder if they truly believe their actions were justified, or if they simply compartmentalized their morality. Post-war legacy. In episode 1852 of the Joe Rogan Experience, Sam Tripoli with Joe Rogan veers into some truly mind-bending and disturbing territory, particularly concerning the Nazis and their chilling post-war II legacy. It's a conversation that utterly dismantles any sanitized version of history you might have learned, replaced with a stark, uncomfortable reality. One of the most jaw-dropping segments delves into Operation Paperclip, where the U.S. brought over more than 1,000 Nazi scientists after World War II. The rationale, as discussed, was a cold, calculated move to beat Stalin and maintain global pole position. My immediate visceral reaction is, how could we compromise so fundamentally on moral grounds for perceived national security? It's a horrifying trade-off, highlighting the terrifying pragmatism of geopolitics.
No, a Nazi, a Scientologist, a pedophile, and a Nazi.
You want some time?
A Satanist.
Let's try it from the beginning.
Okay.
Take it from the top.
A Nazi, a Satanist, a pedophile, and a Scientologist walk into a bar. What do?
What do?
Invent NASA.
The horrible story of NASA is that NASA was constructed with people from Operation Paperclip, which was Nazi scientists, like not just people that were working under Nazi Germany, but people actively practiced as Nazis. The Simon Wiesenthal Center, Google this, make sure it's true because I keep saying it. At one point in time, the Simon Wiesenthal Center, I believe, said that if Wernher von Braun was alive today, they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity. Because people claimed that he had hung the 5 slowest Jews in front of his rocket factory in Berlin. That's how they would encourage people to work faster.
Oh my God.
Now that part, I don't know if it's true, so we should probably find that out or edit it out. But I've said it so many times. I know I've read it. And I know I
Well, you're not pushing books by anti-Semitic, so you look good on this.
I know I watched a documentary where a guy who was a concentration camp survivor remembered seeing Wernher von Braun at the camps or at the rocket factory. But it's a fact that they use Jews as slave labor. It's a fact, right?
Yeah, and it's tragic.
And it's scary shit that they brought those people over, and they knew they were Nazis, and they also had those dueling scars on their face.
This is the Wiesenthal Center's
What does it say?
article about the U.S. and Nazis. And
Right.
It says, this was interesting.
The United States record on this issue can basically be divided into 4 periods. During the first, which lasted from the end of the war in 1945 until approximately 1948, the U.S. government played a major role in the prosecution of senior Nazi officials at the Nuremberg trials and of other criminals in additional proceedings, some of which were held in former concentration camps. During the second period, from 1948 until approximately 1953, the exact opposite happened. With the Cold War already underway, the U.S. lost interest in actively pursuing Nazi war criminals, preferring to build up West Germany as a bulwark against communism and therefore adopting a far more lenient attitude towards former Nazis, some of whom were enlisted as intelligence sources or rocket scientists. Their criminal Nazi past ignored. Equally appalling was the fact that during these years, U.S. immigration authorities allowed entry into the United States as refuge to thousands of the worst of Hitler's East European henchmen. It's true. That's scary shit, dude.
The Nuremberg trial.
Scroll up. Look at this. Holocaust crimes, however, could not be prosecuted in the United States as they had not been as they had been committed overseas, and their victims were not Americans at the time of the crimes were committed. So instead, Nazi criminals were prosecuted for immigration and naturalization violations, that is, for concealing their wartime past. Although this appeared to be a cop-out of sorts, when announced, the decision yielded relatively successful results. The good news was that it was relatively easy to win such cases compared to war crimes prosecutions. The downside was that the punishments, denaturalization and deportation, were often grotesquely incommensurate with the crimes. And does it say anything about Wernher von Braun?
I didn't get anything specifically about him.
But just Google Wernher von Braun was a Nazi. Let's see that.
Well, I mean, they would talk about for like the longest time up until almost the 80s or early 90s, like in Huntsville, you weren't allowed to talk about how he was a Nazi. You'd have to be, because everyone was like convincing themselves like he didn't want to do it and stuff like that.
Think about those times, man. Think about 47, where, when they were doing all this, or 48, when they're bringing all these guys over here. How would any...
The truly sickening detail that follows is the allegation that von Braun hung the 5 slowest Jews in front of his rocket factory to encourage faster work, something Annie mentioned earlier. The Simon Wiesenthal Center supposedly stated that they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity if he were alive today. This absolutely shatters the myth of scientific genius, divorced from horrific atrocities, making you question every hero narrative. It's a chilling statement to how easily evil can be overlooked and integrated when deemed useful. The mention of dueling scars on many of these scientists further paints a picture of a brutal, ingrained culture.
How would anybody find out that the head of NASA was a fucking Nazi? His Nazi record was not widely known until after his death. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, we did not know what he did.
Yeah.
We had no idea. Yeah. Huntsville, Alabama. Wernher von Braun received an unpleasant surprise. A West German court asked him to testify in the trial of 3 former SS men from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp, which had supplied slave labor for the production of the V-2 ballistic missile. Von Braun had been the technical director of that project and visited the associated Mittelwerk factory a dozen times. Now the head of the center that managed the gigantic Saturn V moon rocket, he was afraid the attendant publicity would damage his reputation and that of NASA. He tried to beg off, but in the end spoke to the judge and the court at the West German consulate in New Orleans on February 7th, 1969. He denied any personal responsibility and put as much distance as he could between his, say that word, Peenemünde Rocket Development Center and the Mittelwerk Complex. Yeah, man.
It's crazy.
That's wild shit,
Crazy.
dude. The military did the same with von Braun's SS officer rank and Nazi records of more than 100 associates who had come to the U.S. with him. Wow.
Beyond individual scientists, the conversation touched upon the broader web of Nazi connections, like IBM's strategic alliance with Nazi Germany, showing how deeply corporate interests intertwined with the regime. It wasn't just individual bad actors, it was systemic. And then there's a surreal topic of Nazis escaping to Argentina after the war, creating a giant thriving German community with Hitler's parties. Like Erich Priebke, living openly for decades is just a punch to the gut. It makes you wonder how many other horrific figures truly evaded justice and lived out their lives in comfort. My bias here kicks in hard. How can a society collectively decide to just move on from such profound evil? Elite soldiers. In episode 1445, former Navy SEAL Andy Stumpf tells a story that completely shook my understanding of what it means to be an elite soldier, challenging any comforting biases I might hold about heroes. He recounts the terrifying tale of a man who was the honor man and top graduate of SEAL training, someone who checked every box: discipline, strength, intelligence, leadership. But beneath that seemingly perfect surface lay a chilling truth. The man was a serial killer. My immediate reaction was disbelief, quickly followed by a profound sense of unease. It's easy to put people in uniforms, especially those in elite forces, on a pedestal, assuming their rigorous training and stated mission somehow purify their character. But as Stumpf chillingly reminds us, the line between proctor and predator can sometimes be paper thin. This chilling reminder resonated deeply because it exposes a vulnerability in our collective psyche, our desire to believe in easily identifiable good and evil, to trust that a uniform might signal discipline, but it doesn't always guarantee conscience.
I went through Buds with a sociopath. The honor man of my Buds class is still in jail for chopping people up and then disposing of their bodies with his wife.
Really?
Yeah.
Who were they chopping up?
I don't know the people, but they would bring people back from, I know it happened at least once, it might have happened multiple times, but they would go to bars, find a couple, continue the after party afterwards, elicit an argument, some type of exchange. They killed, I believe it was a man and a woman, chopped him up. He used to work at a grocery store chain, so he knew that the very cyclical removing of the garbage cans there, they got sent to the landfill more often. So he disposed of the bodies in multiple grocery store garbage dumpsters. And then they eventually got caught because in the middle of the night, they broke into a Hooters to steal T-shirts and got caught by the cops. And I believe it was in her purse they found a Spyderco knife with like hair and like basically tissue still on the knife. And I think the woman's ID.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a high-level criminal. They really thought this one through.
And that's the only way they got caught?
That's how they got caught.
Imagine if they didn't break into Hooters.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Well, first off, why the fuck are you breaking into Hooters for
Clean
T-shirts?
your knife, you dirty bitch.
But again, so this is, sociopaths out there, and this is another thing that I try to tell people often. The best people that I ever was around in my entire life was in the SEAL community, and my mortal enemies and the worst people I've ever seen on the face of the earth was in the SEAL community as well. He was the honor man in my buds class, which, if I look back, he had passed more evolutions from a statistical perspective than anybody else in the class. They weren't actually viewing him through the lens of, is this person honorable, or does he, they weren't grading him by his integrity. But it just goes to show you that no selection process is perfect. And if you can't separate an individual from an occupation or a uniform or a black belt, right? If you think that because you have a black belt that you're going to be an awesome person, or because somebody's a SEAL that you're going to be a great person, stand the fuck by. And it's not the norm, right? I don't want him as the anomaly to paint the norm, but it's important for people to remember that those people are out there. And again, they can leverage, from my background, they can leverage the fascination, the curiosity, people wanting to give back. I mean, one of the most common questions that I get from people is, how can I thank people for their service? I'm like, well, A, just say thank you. And then my answer to them is B, is, provide them an opportunity if you feel it's necessary, but don't do anything for them, and don't give them any special treatment.
Stumpf directly critiques the selection process itself, acknowledging that no selection process is perfect. He emphasizes that this individual wasn't judged by his integrity or honor during training, but by his statistical performance in evolutions. This is a crucial point. Training can measure physical and mental fortitude, but it can't always expose a sociopathic core. My personal bias here aligns completely with Stumpf's warning. You can't separate an individual from an occupation or a uniform. If you think someone is an awesome person just because somebody is a SEAL, then stand the fuck by. He passionately urges treating veterans as individuals, judging them based on the merits of their behavior and their worth, not off the merits of their background. Providing special treatment, he argues, doesn't help them either, and is insidious to an organization.
So treat them as an individual, thank them, but treat them as an individual, and judge them based on the merits of their behavior and their worth.
100%, not off the merits of their background. If you have a job, you're like, hey, I want to provide opportunities for veterans, no problem. Provide the opportunities for veterans, but treat them exactly like the person who is in the cubicle next to them, if it's in that environment, obviously. And if you hold the person that was a non-veteran to a certain standard, you better hold the veteran to the same standard. Don't let them get away with anything, because it doesn't help them either.
Right.
It helps everybody in the organization if you set the standard and make sure everybody holds it. It's insidious to an organization to set a standard, and well, why is this guy getting special treatment? Be like, what? Dude, he was a SEAL. Who gives a fuck? It's just a job title. And if that person is sociopathic, or they are, there's a bell curve, there's a top 10% and the top and the bottom 10%. If he's in that bottom 10%, by holding him to that standard, you're going to get an objective viewpoint of that, as opposed to just being blinded by whatever it may be.
It's interesting, but only you can say that, or someone in your position can say that. It's very difficult for someone who's a non-veteran to say anything remotely close to that.
Well, I hope they listen then, because they don't need to say that. They just need to act. They need to just live that. They need to structure their organization with that framework, so it's objective, not subjective. It's like people look at being a SEAL. It's not a Harry Potter wand. I have probably a familiarity and comfort with weapons and tactics more than your average person. But if I'm being completely honest about my old job, I could teach a monkey to do most of the things that I did. I'm serious. I could teach a monkey to do the things that we did. We're not out there doing nuclear physics. You're out there doing, we find an individual, how are we going to get there? Okay, let's figure out how we're going to get there. We train to those standards. We get on target. Everything is based on tactics and standard operating procedures, or TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And everybody is trained to those standards, so you know what to expect from somebody, whether they're from an East Coast team or a West Coast team. You can meet in the middle, and we all are taught to clear rooms the same way, and it's not complicated.
What's truly eerie is how this kind of rigorous, standardized training designed to build unity and crush ego could also, in rare cases, create individuals perfectly capable of hiding something much darker behind flawless execution. The ability to keep your world small, to focus only on the next meal or the next 6 hours, is essential for surviving buds. A sociopath by nature is adept at compartmentalization and detachment, traits that could allow them to excel in such a demanding environment while simultaneously masking their true, horrifying nature. This story forces us to question how much we really know about the ones we celebrate, and the unsettling realization that if someone like that can slip through, who else already has? It's a chilling, necessary reminder that human nature's capacity for darkness transcends titles and uniforms. F-18 UFO Encounters. On episode 1883 of The Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan hosted former Navy F-18 pilot Ryan Graves to discuss an extraordinary topic, unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. Graves, who holds a degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering, served both operationally and as an instructor pilot. With years of experience flying in U.S. airspace and exposure to high-grade military technology, his first-hand encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena carry notable credibility.
Sure. So, my name is Ryan Graves. I have an engineering degree, mechanical and aerospace engineering. I promptly left doing that to go fly F-18s for the Navy as soon as I graduated college. Did that for about a decade, both operationally in combat as well as in an instructor role, teaching the new students. And we did witness something while we were flying in our jets, but we were doing it we witnessed it in the context of our just everyday flying in our missions.
And what year was it that you witnessed this?
So we started seeing these in 2014 was the earliest that I know. 2013, late 2013, early 2014.
During the conversation, Graves describes how his squadron began picking up unknown objects during flights off the east coast of the United States. They weren't simple radar glitches. The contacts were consistent, visible across upgraded radar systems, and confirmed through camera radar systems like FLIR, which detects infrared heat signatures and visuals. Even more startling, these objects were often seen maneuvering across the sky in erratic patterns or hovering motionless against wind speeds of over 100 knots, a feat that defies known aerodynamics.
If we see this essentially little circle, it'll have a tail coming off of it. And that tail kind of represents the nose of the vehicle, at least as its flight path is going. And so with that, we would typically see an aircraft just kind of trudging along with a straight line, taking occasional turns. But these objects had a little bit more of a, I don't want to say random, but more less controlled flight path. That velocity vector would kind of jump around a bit more. They would not proceed in like a perfectly straight line as you would imagine like a flight navigation computer would take you, right? It takes you from A to B in the straightest line possible. These objects seem to kind of be moving in a direction that was not a straight line, but generally proceeding in that direction. And so they would kind of be meandering slightly, but moving in that general direction, both three-dimensionally and horizontally.
So winding around, going up, going down. Mm-hmm. So they're not on a flat plane, and they're not going in a straight line.
So I don't want to draw too many firm statements like that, because we would see them being flat, too. We'd see them perfectly stationary up there, regardless of the wind.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. So what kind of wind are you talking about?
Oh, gosh. I mean, at altitude, you can have anywhere up to 100, 120 knots of airspeed.
What is that in miles per hour?
It's about 130, 140 miles an hour.
So they're completely stationary with 140 mile an hour wind?
Correct.
How would something do that?
It's confusing to me as well. Even if we had something that could just burn that much energy, right? Like if you had a sphere surrounded by little rockets, right? Just imagining something right now.
Okay.
And if you wanted to keep that perfectly stationary, right, against gravity, you could just fire all the rockets at the bottom really fast and hopefully keep it flat, right?
Right.
It's going to have tiny little variations. And then if you have wind hitting it and all this, you could potentially have those rockets try to counter it, but it would never be perfectly still.
Graves' testimony reveals something far more urgent than sensational UFO talk. It exposes a serious operational blind spot in U.S. air defense. We're not talking about tinfoil hats or conspiracy theories here. These were trained military pilots encountering unidentified craft in restricted airspace, day after day, with no identification, no transponders, and zero response from air traffic control or the military chain of command. And that's a big problem, a very big one. When Graves explains that these objects flew racetrack patterns, typical for surveillance missions, It suggests intention, not randomness, not malfunction. That alone could have triggered higher-level investigations, but it didn't. And that's where things feel almost surreal. We're dealing with craft that behave like intelligence-gathering tools, hovering, tracking, maneuvering with unnatural precision, and yet they're met with silence. What really stands out is how the military initially leaned towards sensor malfunction until FLIR visuals confirmed what the radar saw: actual physical objects emitting heat or energy, hovering midair like they were affected by the elements. That's where I think the average person underestimates just how serious this is. These aren't optical illusions. We have multiple systems corroborating these events: radar, infrared, and human visual confirmation. Personally, I think the most chilling part is what the objects are. It's the institutional indifference to them. The most advanced military on Earth, with a $900 billion defense budget, encounters daily incursions into protected airspace and just keeps flying? That tells me two things. Either they know exactly what it is and aren't saying, or they don't know, and that's even scarier.
So somewhere in the range of an airplane.
Yeah, a fighter aircraft would be kind of flying around at those airspeeds, except sometimes they would be perfectly stationary as well.
Right. So it's not exhibiting any sort of patterns that you've recognized in the past?
No, they have actually. So, although
with the stationary, no, right?
Correct. With the stationary, no. With the meandering kind of flight path, no. But I would also see them essentially fly what we call a racetrack pattern. And essentially what that means is they fly in a straight path, and then they do like a 180-degree turn in a certain direction. Then they fly a straight path, then turn again. So that's what we call a racetrack pattern as opposed to a circular holding pattern. We did witness racetrack patterns. In fact, I think there's been some cases off the West Coast just the past couple weeks where people have also been observing objects flying in racetrack patterns high at altitude with lights. So I do recognize that behavior, but I don't necessarily think that means we have to attribute it to normal behavior necessarily.
Interestingly, similar cube-shaped UFOs have been sighted elsewhere. From El Paso, Texas to Missouri and Colorado, civilians have reported and recorded sightings of similar floating cubes, some glowing, some silent, and some accompanied by humming sounds. These recurring appearances have sparked theories about the shape's purpose. A cube, Graves speculated, could be structurally efficient for housing tech or maintaining propulsion systems. It might even be ideal for stacking or docking, like modular spacecraft.
So that happened when we visually saw one. And the first time we visually saw one, the object was directly at what we call the entry point of the area. So, that box that I told you about in the sky that starts 10 miles off the coast, there's a particular GPS, location and altitude where incoming traffic will fly in, and outbound traffic will fly in the exact same spot, but will fly out 1,000 feet lower. There were two aircraft from my squadron, VFA 11, and they flew, took off as a flight of two. That means they're essentially flying in a formation like this. And as they hit the area, one of these objects went right between the aircraft. The lead air crew saw the object. The Dash 2 aircraft crew did not, which is not surprising because they're usually, you're very focused on flying formation. You're just staring right at that aircraft. The lead really has actual leeway to look around. So he saw it, and, he immediately came back. I have to assume he didn't have it on his radar because he wouldn't have flown through this object at the entrance point. He turned around, flew back, landed, and I was in the ready room when he come back, and he had all his gear on, which typically is not a good thing because you want to get that stuff off as fast as possible. So usually means there's a problem of some nature, and he was just sitting there saying, "Hey, I almost hit one of those damn things." And we all knew what he was referring to, even though we didn't necessarily have a name for it, just because we were seeing these so much. And he described it. He described it just as a black or dark gray cube, and that cube was inside of a clear, translucent sphere. And essentially, the apex or the corners of that cube, best he could tell, were touching that inside of that.
Graves isn't a conspiracy theorist. He's a credible Navy pilot raising alarm bells that too few people seem willing to hear. And the fact that we've normalized unidentified craft in defense-sensitive airspace, that's not just negligent, it's terrifying. No glory, no parade. All right, Buckle up, because if you thought war was all Hollywood heroics and decisive victories, you're about to get a serious reality check. In episode 962, former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink absolutely tears down the pretty facade we've built around conflict, revealing the unvarnished, ugly truth that nobody wants to talk about. Jocko, with his signature no-nonsense delivery, peels back every comforting layer we like to wrap around the word war. He states unequivocally that there's no glory, no parades, just hard truths. My immediate thought as a civilian that this is vital listening. We as a society have this almost cinematic idea of combat, but Jocko's perspective forces us to confront the brutal reality. It makes you realize that once you've truly seen what war looks like, you stop asking how to win and start asking if it was ever worth it. He even touches on figures like Tim Kennedy, who re-enlisted because he believes he's put on this earth to kill bad guys. While that drive is certainly powerful for some, Jocko's broader narrative ensures we don't reduce war to such a simplistic good versus evil dichotomy.
All this ideas about interacting with human beings, they just don't change. Like, there's little variants, but whether you're dealing with kids or whether you're dealing with adults and whether you're dealing with business people, whether you're dealing with soldiers on the battlefield, the leadership principles, they don't change. And therefore, you can, whether you're trying to get people to go out and capture and kill a bad guy, or whether you're trying to get them to build some product and sell it, the principles of leadership don't change. You're still trying to get a bunch of totally independent people, right? And that's one of the myths we have to overcome a lot, because everyone thinks, oh, in the military, everyone's just like a robot. And that's just not true. Everybody in the military is free. They're people. They're people. They're free-thinking people, and they're going to come up with their own ideas. They're going to have their own agendas, and they're going to think of ways to do things that they think are better than yours. So you're going to have all these independent free thinkers, and you got to get them on board with the same plan to go out and execute. And so it doesn't matter if you're on the battlefield or in business. That's what you're trying to get done, and the leadership principles don't change.
To me, that's, as a person who's never been in the military, it's one of the fascinating aspects of how it works. Is like how do you get all these different people to follow through on a plan, and who are the leaders, and why do the leaders have the right ideas, and who educates them as to have the right idea, to having the right ideas. Like, I know that a lot of people are excited about where the military is right now. Like, Tim Kennedy re-enlisted.
Yeah, and God bless him.
Yeah, he re-enlisted because he believes that the military has support now. And look, Tim Kennedy believes he was put on this earth to kill bad guys, and that's what he wants to do. I mean,
I think I agree with Tim Kennedy.
I think I agree with him too.
For sure.
Obviously, he enjoys it. I mean, he's not fucking around. I mean, he went back in. He put his money where his mouth is, and in his eyes, that this is the way that it should have been, that you should give the military the chance to do their job. That's their idea. And then other people believe that there should be much more civilian oversight, and there should be much more checks and balances before things get done. This is a big debate that's going on today.
Well, I think there's two different things that you just talked about. That is what the military gets told to do and how they do it. And those are two different things. And I think that, yes, absolutely, the civilians should control and do control the military, by the way. They do control. The civilians are the military is under control of civilians. And yet, once you say, okay, this is what we want to have happen, you need to let the military professionals figure out how they're going to go.
One of the big ongoing debates he dives into is the tension between civilian oversight and military execution. Jocko and Joe discuss how, yes, civilians absolutely should and do control the military's objectives. That's essential for democratic accountability. But here's the kicker. Once the mission is set, military professionals need the freedom to determine how to accomplish it. But too many checks and balances or rules imposed by people without combat experience can actually put soldiers in more danger. And honestly, that just makes so much sense. It's like asking an expert surgeon to operate while an untrained committee dictates every incision. Lives are literally on the line. Vietnam was a big quagmire precisely because there was too much civilian oversight hampering military leaders. The notion that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was very likely a false flag also just adds to the unsettling idea of how easily wars can be initiated under murky, even deceptive pretenses.
Yeah, that's where it gets tricky, right? Because if you're in one of the things that was explained to me by a friend who's a Navy SEAL, he was saying that when something needs to get done, and you have all these people that are telling you how you can do it, how you can't do it, like people that are not experiencing combat and don't understand what could or could not go sideways. Like, to put more problems in place or to put more checks and balances in place, you're actually going to put these people in more danger.
That is true. Yeah, you should, like I said, if you let the civilians decide what it is that needs to be accomplished, and then the military leaders decide how they're going to go ahead and make that happen. And I mean, it goes back to Vietnam. You know, there was too much civilian oversight of what was happening in Vietnam, and the military leaders they didn't really have the wherewithal, not even the wherewithal, they didn't have the free reign to go out and try and make things happen the way they wanted to, and it ended up in a big quagmire.
Well, Vietnam seems like, to me, from an outsider, to be one of the most fucked up wars ever.
Absolutely.
It didn't totally make sense that it was happening, and then now we know that the Gulf of Tonkin was very likely a false flag, and that there was some sort of motivation to get there in the first place. And then you're dealing with guerrilla warfare for the first time ever in U.S. history. Like, they didn't exactly know how to handle this.
No, we didn't. And we didn't adapt very well to what was happening on the ground, which is always going to be problematic. If you have closed-minded people in the military, if people are closed-minded, you're not going to be able to move forward against when the battlefield changes. And the battlefield changes all the time. I mean, you can look at Iraq. The battlefield changed drastically from this big conventional force that we went up there to fight against Saddam's big army. Well, once that fell apart, then what happened? Now all of a sudden we were facing guerrillas again and an insurgency, and it took us several years to change our strategy from we didn't even know what to do. We're, oh my God, what do we do? There's all these people running around. What do we do with all these people running around, and how do we get these people under control? And the civilians want us here, and yet if we don't do the right thing, now the civilians don't want us here. What do we need to do? So it took us some time to adjust our strategy in Iraq. And luckily, we had some good leaders that went ahead.
Then comes the gut punch, the truth that makes most people squirm, the will to kill people. Jocko bluntly states that if a nation goes to war, it must accept that this is the most important thing, and soldiers have to have the will to kill people. My immediate internal monologue was, finally, someone said it out loud. Because no one wants to hear it. It's ugly and horrible. My personal, deeply felt opinion here is that this is the absolute core truth that must be confronted before any military action is ever taken. The sanitation of war. Like the Bush administration's decision not to show photographs of coffins coming home, is a monumental disservice to the public and to those who make the ultimate sacrifice. Hiding the cost in a beautiful bubble allows us to ignore the true sacrifices and consequences.
Isn't it also that when you're in war and the strategy, or not the strategy, but the motivation is very clear, like if you're fighting against Hitler's army in World War II, this is very clear that you're dealing with an evil force. Whereas in Vietnam, it's like, wait a minute, why are we here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
communism? What's happening?
Extremely, extremely challenging, no doubt. And that is why, and I've talked about this before, if America or any nation is going to go to war, you have to decide that this is the most important thing in the world. You have to, and the wills that I talk about that you have to execute this war, you got to have the will to kill people. And again, I say this all the time, no one wants to hear it because it's ugly and horrible, but when you say you're going to kill people in war, you're not just going to be able to perfectly kill just the bad guys. Civilians are going to die. It is a nightmare. Kids, women, it's horrible, it's awful. And if you think, oh, I'm going to go to war and we're just going to kill the bad guys, it's not going to happen. War is too complex. It's just not going to be saying like, hey, I'm going to go and fight in the UFC and I'm not going to get hit. It's not going to happen. You're going to get hit, you're going to get bruised up, you're going to get dinged, and it's the same thing in war. So you have to have the will to kill people. Of course, it's easy to have the will to kill the bad guys, but then you have to accept the fact that some innocent people are going to die, and that is going to be awful. And then on the other side of the coin is, of course, if you're going to send people to war.
Ultimately, war is jacked up and not glorious. It's a horrible, horrible event. And maybe robots and cyber warfare would help our case greatly. The idea of Boston Dynamics robots evolving to fight future wars, potentially leading to a surrender scenario for nations without such technology, is a chilling but plausible vision. It makes you wonder, if robots fight, does that make war any less jacked up? or simply shift the human cost from direct combat to those at the mercy of such technology. The overarching message, in my view, is a profound call for unflinching realism about war. It's a bloodbath, not a speech or slogan. When leaders sell it like a product, we, the public, have a responsibility to remember the human cost hidden behind every applause line. WMD, Weapons of Mass Destruction. Up next is something pretty wild, because it's not about the broad, sweeping story of war we've touched on before. Instead, in episode 2244, the narrative shifts to something arguably just as unsettling, and perhaps even more immediate: mysterious drone incursions over U.S. airspace. This isn't some sci-fi movie. It's apparently happening now, with dozens of them, hundreds, flying over military bases, over cities, over your home. And the most chilling part, no one knows where they come from. And even worse, no one's doing anything to stop them.
It's very disturbing that someone could operate these things and have, how many, what is the estimated number of them?
That's a great question. At this point, I'm comfortable making a guess of probably over 800 or 1,000. And how many of those are sightings of the same object? How many of those are individual objects? How many of those are unique objects that?
Right.
So it's tough to say, but this isn't just a few objects that people are seeing. And so I can imagine some technologies that will allow traditional UAVs or drones to operate without emitting, right? So they could be, they could have a self-contained navigational system, right? Maybe they have their own onboard maps and they're using cameras to map where they are.
So then they would be completely autonomous. You just send them out there and they would have a task and they would go through whatever their task is and navigate via their GPS or whatever tracking system they're using.
Exactly. And then, what is their task, right?
Right.
Is it just to instill panic and fear? Is it because they're sensing something? And if they are sensing something, they would have to be using what's called passive sensors, right? So like a camera system is passive, but if you're shooting a radar out and having it bounce off of something, that's active, right? And that's easier to detect than a passive system. So I could imagine, a fully self-contained autonomous drone system that is doing something potentially with passive sensors that allows it to operate without emissions, which is going to make it harder to track.
If they're doing it at night, if they do have passive systems, like some sort of an optical system, wouldn't that be hindered by the low light conditions, or do we have stuff that is able to detect whatever they're looking for at night?
Yeah, depends what they're looking for, but ultimately there is tech. There's electro-optical systems, there's infrared camera systems, not unlike the jets or the systems that we had on my jet. But we were able to detect these objects with infrared when we were flying off the eastern seaboard. There are a number of reports from law enforcement that their infrared systems are not able to pick these objects up. And not just this year, but also the incidents over Langley last year. The pilots that responded to that incident, I've spoken to them, they weren't able to lock these up with their infrared systems either. So they do seem to be exhibiting some type of signature.
My immediate reaction watching this is a mixture of alarm and profound skepticism. In a world plastered with surveillance cameras and advanced military tech, how is this even possible? Ryan reveals he's interacted with high-level government organizations, including those who deal with weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. He specifically asked these WMD folks if these drones were linked to a loose nuke or other WMD threats, given the online chatter. And here's the critical, reassuring, yet still unsettling takeaway. They've assured him that that's not the case. If it were, these specialists would be in a secure room, a SCIF, 24/7, trying to track it down. So, at least for now, we can seemingly dispel the frantic missing nuke from Ukraine rumor. Plus, the current methods for finding radiation rely on ground teams, not typically hundreds of flying drones. And that gamma radiation is usually well shielded, making aerial detection difficult. So, good to know we don't need to fleece the East Coast for Nevada just yet.
So is the signature management so is it a heat signature that they're giving off? So maybe there's some sort of a cooling mechanism inside of these things? Like how, if they have a propulsion system, so you would imagine it's some sort of an electric engine, right? Because a lot of them are very quiet. That's got to be giving off some kind of heat, right?
Yeah, and that goes to some very base physics, right? We create heat whenever we have, stored energy and we utilize it. So to be able to mitigate that to such a degree that you can't even detect them at all, it's pretty tough. I mean, I can imagine you can reduce your signature. We do it in fighter jets, right? Through kind of just like baffles where we cover the engine essentially to make it harder to see. But to have zero ability to detect or lock onto these objects is not a technology I'm familiar with.
So other than that, are they exhibiting any type of movement that's extraordinary, or their ability to turn angles? Is there anything about them that points to this being superior technology?
It's tough to say. Based on what I've seen just in the public from reports and kind of amateur photographers and witnesses, some of them do seem to be making pretty sharp turns. I wouldn't call them like physics breaking turns, but they don't seem to be operating like a normal aircraft, right? So they're down low, they're making what appear to be pretty high G turns, maybe like 3, 4, 5 G turns at relatively low airspeeds, which is indicative of them having a pretty significant power supply, right? Anytime you turn like that, you're burning energy essentially. So for them to be able to make these high G maneuvers and then remain in the area for another 5 or 6 or 7 hours and still have the battery life or whatever's propelling them, to then go over the ocean to a point where they're untrackable, again, I'm not really familiar with that type of capability either.
But even without a WMD link, the mystery deepens. If these aren't ours, then why can't we do more about it? This is the part that truly infuriates me. We live in a world flooded with surveillance, yet these drones have stayed invisible to accountability. How can they not be tracked back to their source? How come no one's been arrested, and how come no one's been caught? What's truly amazing is the scale and duration. This isn't a new phenomenon. It started about 2 years ago, specifically around military bases like Langley Air Force Base. But the volume is what's new. For 3 years now, unknown objects have been operating over Langley right before Christmas. And this year, they've come back in a much wider swath. We're talking all over New Jersey, all the way up to Massachusetts, with reports from Texas, Florida, California, Ohio, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. Even Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was shut down recently due to an incursion. And this isn't a one-off event.
By starting with the fact that this started about 2 years ago, at least. So,
but not like this.
A little bit like this.
Really?
So,
in this volume?
Not in this volume. That's the differentiator right there. But so Langley Air Force Base, you might be familiar with the fact that they had drone incursions of an unknown type, unknown origin last year.
Right.
That happened during about a 2.5, 3 week period right before Christmas. Right where we are now. That also happened the year before over Langley. Unknown objects operating over the base. They couldn't tell where they were going. They were unprepared for them. Same period of time, 2-3 weeks before Christmas. This is year 3, right? And they were expecting them to come again for third year in a row over Langley. And there was, some effort put forward to be able to better understand these when they came back. And they did come back, but they came back in a much wider swath, right? Now we have them all over New Jersey, all the way up to Massachusetts. And it's hard to tell exactly with the quality of the reporting right now, because it seems to be, the bigger the story gets, the more people are just looking up and seeing anything and pointing it out. But there are reports from Texas to Florida to California, Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's not just New Jersey itself, it seems. And even the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was shut down for a drone incursion just this last.
The most disturbing aspect to me is that nothing has been done. They're not scrambling jets to try to meet these things and follow them and track them. They're not shooting them down. It makes us appear so vulnerable. The explanation given is shockingly mundane. Antiquated laws. Because these drones often operate in low altitude, Class G airspace, away from airports, the government has to make the assumption that it's a U.S. citizen that's operating these. And because of that, they apparently need a warrant to wiretap or intercept signals, even with the Patriot Act. 3 years, thousands of flights, no arrests, no interceptions, no accountability. This whole situation feels less like an isolated incident and more like a massive, gaping hole in our national security. It leaves you with a chilling thought. Either someone has outpaced our military, or we've stopped pretending to care. Mysterious drones. In episode 1363, We take a sharp turn from the unsettling, somewhat abstract narrative of mysterious drone incursions over U.S. airspace, which we've touched on in relation to episode 2244, to something far more visceral, the personal, soul-altering reality of war, as shared by Medal of Honor recipient Dakota Meyer. This isn't about external threats. It's about the internal landscape forged by combat and its enduring scars. Meyer recounts a specific day in Afghanistan, September 8, 2009, when he was just 21 years old, describing it as an insane firefight. What immediately struck me was his raw honesty. He trained for war every single day, but could have never imagined that day the way it was. This highlights a critical, often unacknowledged chasm between theoretical preparation and the profound, transformative reality of battle. It's clear that the experience reshaped him entirely, stripped away any prior cockiness about fighting. He learned that sometimes the air support and external advantages he'd come to expect simply aren't there, leaving just you, your weapon, and the weight of what you've done.
Like right now, there are U.S. troops. Somebody wondering if they're going to be able to come home and see their family again. That's reality. Whether you want to ignore it or not, like, that's reality. And that was me, September 8, 2009. And it was just it was a chaotic day.
It's amazing how you could have thousands of days in your life, and one day changes the way you look at everything.
One day changes the way you look at everything. And, and like the further I go on, I look at it different. I always talk about this story of, whenever this guy came up behind me and I ended up killing him with a rock. And I always remember I remember it, like I see it every night. Like I remember, like I just see his face. And like because there was a point that I feel like that anybody that, whether they're injured or anything, like they realize they're defeated. I don't know. I just think there's a point when you look at somebody and they know they're going to die. And I'll never forget that. And now I look at it and I see it, and I always think that this guy is a son to somebody. His mother and father are going to miss him. This guy, he believes in his cause as much as I do. He doesn't believe he's wrong. This guy, he could have had a wife or kids that are never going to see their father again. Just like, my dad might have never seen me again if it was switched. And really, I don't even know. I don't hate him. I don't even know this guy. We're just here at this place right now because we were born in two different countries.
Were you out of weapons? Were you out of ammo?
He had came up and he started choking me. I had shot him once before, and I was trying to pick my buddy Dad Ali. My one of my closest Afghans, Dad Ali, had been shot. He had been killed, and I came around this terrace to get him, and I was on my knee, and this guy came up behind me, and
so he didn't have a weapon either. He was
no, he did. He had a weapon, and I ended up shooting him from the ground, and I thought he was dead when he fell on the ground, and I kind of moved down and got down with Dad Ali because I was still getting shot at from this machine gun up on this hill. And I was trying to make myself small as I could, and this guy ends up coming up and choking me. Like I thought he was dead, and he ends up choking me out. He starts trying to choke me out, and eventually let up a little bit, and I ended up getting around him, and we were fighting back and forth, and I can remember all I was thinking about was like, don't let his legs get on me. Like, these guys, their legs are, they've been crawling up mountains their whole life, and he was a pretty big dude, and I just remember getting on top of him. Finally got on top of him, and I was rolling on top of him. He didn't have all the gear on, I did, and I remember getting on top of him like I was straddling him, and I'm just reaching up trying to grab for anything I can. And I'm holding him and holding him down with my throat, with my forearm, and I'm just grabbing anything I can. And finally I ended up grabbing a rock, and I just started beating this dude's face in, and I just started beating and beating and beating. And I remember just like, finally, like after hitting him, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, whatever, I remember him like finally just kind of looking at me and like, just, it's like he's like, I'm just looking him in the eyes, like obviously closer than me to you right now, and you just see you can tell, like he knows where this is going. And I always think about that, obviously I would kill him a million times over again, right? He was the enemy, like I don't feel bad about that part of it, but I just think about, like, in that moment, if I can find a way to relate to him in that moment, a man I'm taking his life, we all in America can find a way to connect with each other. If we don't connect with each other, it's because we choose.
The enduring impact of that day is brutally clear. Meyer still wakes up a couple of nights a month with anxiety attacks, so severe he once knocked off a tooth veneer. He shares a heart-wrenching moment where his 3-year-old daughter saw him in this state, telling him, "It's okay, Daddy. You're not a bad dad." This, in my view, is the true unsung cost of war. It doesn't end when the guns fall silent. It comes home, echoing through the years, affecting generations. As he puts it, when you live through something like this, you never really leave it behind.
I was actually speaking last week. I was on the road. It's the first time, I'm always nervous. Like if in the middle of the night my daughter gets scared, or she comes down and gets in my bed, like I'm always really like nervous about that, because like I was so nervous about it, because I was just, gosh, I never want them to see me in that state, right? And the other day we were on the road. I was speaking out in North Carolina, and she's obviously, we were in a hotel, so she was staying with me, and I don't know, I didn't feel good that night. So what I did is I put a pillow between us, and gosh, I had one. I knocked my tooth off. I knocked my veneer off. Like, it was so terrible. And she just looked at me. She's 3, and she just looked at me and she said, "It's okay, Daddy. You're not a bad dad."
Wow.
And
at 3.
At 3, and I was like, gosh, But yeah, I mean, you still, I mean, that's why you look at it, and I see these people who play these video games and they get nothing from, like, there's no emotional attachment to it, and it's like, this stuff's real. Like, there's nobody who, I would go out on a limb and say there's nobody who sees this stuff and you don't come back and deal with it. Like, it's a normal process to being part of not normal.
Perhaps the most disheartening takeaway in his view that war will never be resolved, it's a maintenance program. This bleak outlook challenges the optimistic hope for a final end to conflict, suggesting a perpetual struggle against certain forms of evil. However, he counters the cynical military-industrial complex argument by highlighting the profound sacrifice of the all-volunteer military. These are individuals, like Meyer himself, who signed up at 17, willing to give their lives on the idea of democracy. For people they've never met, it's an incredible, almost incomprehensible level of selfishness, often driven by a deep sense of duty and, in his case, even defiance against a recruiter's doubt. It reminds me that behind every strategic decision, every headline about conflict, there are real people carrying an unimaginable burden, forever changed by their experience. UFOs from China. In episode number 2219 of the Joe Rogan Experience, former President Donald Trump joins Joe for a candid conversation about UFOs, alien life, and the increasing number of unexplained aerial sightings. Trump recalls interviews he had had with elite jet pilots, describing them as solid people and great everything, who reported witnessing strange objects during flights. According to their accounts, these objects weren't meteors or comets. They appeared as round, fast-moving balls that outpaced even the F-22, one of the fastest and most advanced fighter jets in the world.
I interviewed jet pilots that say they saw something. If you saw them, you'd love to have them as your
I've had
son.
a couple in here. Commander David Fravor.
Yeah.
I had him in, who had that sighting in 2004. Very compelling with video evidence, radar evidence. Ryan Graves.
I don't believe his name, but I interviewed jet pilots that were solid people. Perfect. I mean, great pilots, great everything. And they said, we saw things, sir, that were very strange. Like a round ball, but it wasn't a comet or a meteor. It was something. and it was going 4 times faster than an F-22, which is a very fast plane, and it was round, which is in theory a great shape.
So when you were talking to these people, was this something that you were compelled to have conversations about? Was this your personal interest?
No, a little bit. It's not a great interest for me, but it's a little interest. I get that question as much as almost any question. Do you think that we have aliens coming, flying around or whatever?
What do you think?
There's no reason not to. I mean, there's no reason not to think that Mars and all these planets don't have life, because
Mars, we've had probes there and rovers, and I don't think there's any life there.
Well, maybe it's life that we don't know, but maybe
there was life there at one point in time. This is the speculation about Mars, that Mars had an atmosphere at one point in time, a long time ago, that could support life. It also had large bodies of water, but we've had no evidence of even bacterial life that exists on Mars. But the universe is pretty vast.
While he doesn't dismiss these accounts entirely, Trump remains skeptical about attributing them to extraterrestrial life. His skepticism leads to a broader discussion about the origin of these phenomena. Joe and Trump explore the idea that what many describe as UFOs could be, in fact, advanced surveillance drones, possibly from foreign adversaries like China.
I looked at what China did to this. They would have never done it with me, where they put the balloon up. And a lot of people thought for a little while that was one of these things. So,
that's a lot of the speculation too, that some of these drones that hover over battleships, that these are Chinese drones, and that they're not UFOs.
They could be also.
There's some super sophisticated.
But I did interview, let's say 3 or 4 guys and without tremendous interest, if you had them, as I said, you'd love to have them as your children. Solid, beautiful people. They said, "Sir, there's something there."
There's something there. Yeah, I've talked to quite a few of them.
They're not conspiracy guys.
Well, I mean, the Commander David Fravor thing in 2004 off the coast of San Diego, they clocked that thing going from 50,000 feet above sea level to 50 in a second.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is.
That's tough to beat.
Yeah, they saw something in the water. It was hovering over that something that was making a disturbance in the water. They got video evidence of this thing. 2 different fighter jets with pilots in them saw it. There's, visual evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence, radar evidence. Whatever the hell it is, it moves in a way that would turn a human being into jello if they were inside of it. The G-force, no one would survive.
Oh,
so what is that? And it doesn't have a heat signature. They don't know what their propulsion system was. But
when you fly in some of these jets, these pilots have to be in great shape.
Oh yeah, I flew with the Blue Angels once.
Yeah,
I got to fly. I guess it's an FA-18.
And those are older machines.
And they're crazy.
When you fly in some of these things,
oh my God,
amazing. Yeah, but
I can imagine.
You got to be special.
But these things that these people are encountering are far superior to what we know.
The fact that something so blatant could cross into U.S. airspace and remain airborne for days is a symptom of deeper failures in detection, response, and public communication. His assertion that such actions wouldn't have occurred under his administration may be partisan, but it underscores a broader truth. America's aerial dominance is no longer absolute. What's particularly valuable here is how this exchange grounds the UFO debate in national security pragmatism. It moves the conversation away from fringe territory and demands serious evaluation from defense analysts, aerospace engineers, and policymakers. If we continue defaulting to either aliens or hoax, we're missing the real risk that these sightings could be signals of foreign tech superiority, gaps in our radar systems, or internal hesitance to act due to political optics. A veteran's silent burden. All right, let's switch gears and dive into episode 1247, where former Navy SEAL Andy Stumpf opens up about something incredibly profound and often overlooked: why veterans are so often silent when the public debates the military, its budget, or even proposes defunding it. This isn't about the raw combat experience we've talked about with Dakota Meyer. It's about the aftermath and the unique burden carried by those who've served.
I left. But I mean, I went from Santa Cruz, California, where I grew up, where it could well be the origin of outrage culture and social justice warriors, to the military, to back out of the military, So I had very different optics when it comes to perspective, where I started and then what I was seeing when I came out.
Well, that's the take that I always see from people that are in the military or have been in the military, is their understanding of what's important and not important is so much different because it's truly life and death.
Not all the time, but I think if you are exposed to that environment enough, it'll recalibrate your perspective of what's important and what's not.
Yeah. Did you ever read any Sebastian Junger?
I did.
Did you
Tribe
read
is a great book, yes.
Yeah.
I read that off your recommendation, actually.
Did it speak to you, like in terms of like your own personal experience?
It made complete sense. I probably would have used different terms in different places throughout, but the concept that he was talking about absolutely made sense. I mean, so the SEAL teams, whether or not people live up to this, an argument could be made, but one of the key tenets is, the brotherhood, which is just another way of talking about a tribe.
Yeah. Yeah. I just felt like it was really interesting to me, like that book, that one of the most moving part of it was how connected these people are when they're together and when they're at war, and what that brotherhood, that camaraderie means to them, and how they feel disconnected when they're back in regular civilization and they get depressed. It's like their life had been led at such a high vibration, intensity, so much on the line. It means so much. Everything means so much. There's so much dedication, so much commitment. And then to go back to the regular life is very, very difficult for a lot of people.
Stumpf poses a really critical question. Why don't veterans argue back? Why don't they correct the headlines or the protest signs? His answer is poignant and cuts deep. Because some wars aren't worth fighting twice, especially when the second time is just words. This immediately resonated with me, especially after hearing Dakota Meyer describe his ongoing anxiety attacks years after combat. It highlights that the burden of war doesn't end when they come home. It's a weight that doesn't translate, something that can't be argued, explained, or posted online. For many, silence isn't surrender. It's the only way to live with what they still carry. It's a form of self-preservation, a mercy.
So for me, I got shot in the hip, high up on my left-hand side, but by the time I made it to the hospital, my single complaint was my ankle. I was just telling her, like, I didn't remember falling on my ankle, I didn't remember hitting my ankle, but it felt like somebody had taken a sledgehammer and just beat it into powder. And so they were very careful, and then, they cut my shoes off of me, they cut my pants off me, and the first thing they did was take an x-ray of my ankle, and they're like, dude, you're totally fine. But it felt like it was destroyed because it was the nerve that got interacted with high up. It short-circuited all the way down to the terminal point of the nerve. And for me, it never came back. I'm hoping that, obviously for the fighters, it eventually comes back, because I had drop foot for 6 months to a year. I eventually was able to start dorsiflexing my foot again, but I still can't feel my left leg from the kneecap down on the side. The far left-hand side, and as it wraps over the top of my foot, is completely numb.
And is this because of the actual damage to the nerve, or something touching the nerve?
They don't know. That was an interesting part of being hurt as well, is talking to people who have decades of medical experience and having them look at you and go, I don't know.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Especially without an MRI, right? Because they can't.
They can't, and because they're worried about it being pulled out. Same thing why the concussion history that I have, it's an estimate based off of operational history, because they can't throw me in that same machine and image my brain.
Oh, whoa.
Because it's spitting magnets. And
right.
There's metal all over the left-hand side of my pelvis, and I don't know how much it would have to move, but if it just clipped that nerve again, it was probably one of the more difficult times in my life. My leg felt like it was on fire 24 hours a day, which I could ignore during the daytime, but where it got me was at nighttime. I would lay down in bed, and it just felt like I had dipped my leg in gas and put a lighter onto it. So I was on high dosages of like gabapentin and Neurontin, which are central nervous system suppressors. So I started feeling the cognitive effect of that, so I backed myself off of that. Wasn't in a great phase of my life, so I was, of course, washing those down with massive amounts of alcohol, taking 3 to 4 Ambien, staying awake because my tolerance to all that stuff was so high. And the last thing I ever want to do is go through that.
And here's where my own bias comes in. It's incredibly frustrating to see people casually dismiss the necessities of a strong defense, especially after discussing things like the mysterious drone incursions over U.S. airspace in episode 2244. where the sheer vulnerability of our nation was implicitly highlighted by the inability to stop hundreds of unknown objects. Yet Stumpf brings a healthier, almost philosophical perspective to this frustration. He says it is frustrating for him at times, but he balances it with the understanding that this ability to dissent is what this country is supposed to be about. He believes these critics are an extreme minority, but very vocal. Stumpf emphasizes a gap in understanding between those who have served in combat and those who haven't, and he accepts that. That's okay. This acceptance is humbling. He even states, "I'm glad that it was me that did that and had to bear any weight or burden that came with that to allow them to have whatever opinion they want." This echoes Dakota Meyer's profound selflessness, willing to give his life on the idea of democracy for people he'd never met. It underscores the immense, almost incomprehensible sacrifice made by our all-volunteer military.
Like I said, so many misconceptions about what the military does, what we do overseas, how many countries we are in overseas, how deep we are into some of these countries, how forecasted and how forward-looking the military is, looking for emerging threats as opposed to just responding. And all of that creates space so people can exercise their right to voice their First Amendment, right of saying those things.
Does it frustrate you, though, that they don't have a real understanding?
I'm grateful that they live in a place where they don't have that great understanding. Because like I said, they have the space to be confused. They're not pushed under a thumb. They're not being told, you have to say this or it's going to be your fucking head in the square.
Right.
It is frustrating for me at times, but I balance that with that's what this country is supposed to be about. You're supposed to be able to voice your dissent. Right, and I believe that the system will correct, and it does correct for itself. There are people that believe that, but I think the majority of people, again, silent majority versus extreme minority. I think those people are in the extreme minority, but they're very vocal. I think most people are incredibly appreciative of what the military does. But having said that, if you've never served in the military and you've never been in a combat occupation, and then you've never applied that occupation for real, there's going to be a gap, and there's going to be a gap in understanding, and that's okay. So it's frustrating, yes, but I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad that they are not, and this country is not in a position where they are getting drafted and forced into that position. I'm glad that it was me that did that and had to bear any weight or burden that came with that to allow them to have whatever opinion they want.
That's a great perspective.
Stumpf reflects that getting hurt in combat changed his perspective, forcing him to confront his own mortality and the impact of his service. He needed that lifting of my head to have that perspective. This resonates with the idea that war profoundly transforms individuals, as seen in Meyer's struggles. The Iron Man Project. In episode 1827, we delve into a fascinating and frankly terrifying realm as former Special Operations Tech Operator Kristin Beck discusses something straight out of a comic book, The Iron Man Project. But here's the kicker, it's not fiction. It was a real military experiment, and they came incredibly close to achieving its goal. This isn't just about building armor, it's about re-engineering the soldier, enhancing their strength, speed, and impact resistance through a powered exoskeleton. Beck, who originally worked on the project when it was called Carnivore, describes how it's constantly evolving, using cutting-edge materials like titanium and carbon fiber. Imagine a soldier capable of carrying 1,000 pounds and even flying. That's the ambition. But as someone who's thought a lot about the practicalities of conflict, my immediate thought was, what about the logistics? Beck brings this up too. If you have a squad of 12 soldiers, each wearing a 1,000-pound exoskeleton, what kind of aircraft, Humvees, or boats are you going to use to transport them? It literally changes everything about military operations. This highlights a crucial point often missed in futuristic combat discussions, the sheer complexity of supporting such advanced individual capabilities.
That one is fucked because the people are actually being poisoned by the fucking air, which they need. Like,
It's
you
a
don't even get a chance
localized
to choose.
A local area.
But then everyone's scared of nuclear. But nuclear seems to be one of the only ways where you can generally assume that unless there's a meltdown, you're going to get some pretty solid power out of that. And it's not nearly as environmentally impactful until it's really until it goes really bad.
When I was working on the Iron Man project,
what is the Iron Man project?
It was the Iron Man project.
What does that mean?
So we're trying to build the suit.
Really?
We've been working on it for a long time.
I didn't know about
I was
this.
on the beginning of the project. It was called Carnivore at first and a few other names. But in the beginning, there was only a small handful of us working on it.
What are they using to make the body suit out of?
It's changed so much right now that it's all kinds of materials. I mean, titanium, carbon fiber, all the top stuff.
And is it supposed to be able to fly?
It's going to do a lot of stuff.
Does it have an exoskeleton, so it's stronger?
Yeah, it's exo, yeah. And it's much stronger. You can carry, 1,000 pounds. You can do a lot.
I've
all the
seen
guns,
that stuff. That stuff's wild.
So we're getting there, but if you think about that kind of a suit, that exoskeleton, how are you going to move that exoskeleton, those people? So if you had a squad, let's just say you had 12 dudes in those exoskeletons, what airplane are you going to use? What Humvees, what vehicles, how are you going to get these guys around, what boats?
Right,
like
how heavy are those things?
It changes everything.
Right.
They're 1,000 pounds, yeah.
Jesus
they're
Christ.
huge.
So you can only get like a couple of those on a plane.
Yeah, maybe 4. I don't know.
Ooh.
But that's one of the issues that we're running into is the fact that if we start going in this direction, we start going to exoskeletons, we have to change everything else.
That makes sense.
So, and when we were doing it, it was like the long pole in the tent for the, and I was on these think tanks and I was always like the innovator SEAL. I was a weird SEAL. You already know that, I guess.
Well, I guess. We'll get to that part.
I was a techie for it. So I was very technical, and I was working a lot of the national laboratories. Mm-hmm. So all the places that we built, the Manhattan Project, we still have all those facilities all around. And so we still use them, and we work with them, and we try to push the envelope for military and civilian use. So there's a lot of things that I was part, innovator, inventor of stuff that's gone to the civilian world. And the Iron Man project was a really cool one.
And what are they powering it with?
That's the problem, was the long pole in the tent. I kept talking to them, and I was working with all the national labs, Pacific Northwest, and all those guys. And nuclear battery was pretty much the only way you can go. So it'd be a little battery about that big.
The biggest hurdle, the long pole in the tent, as Beck calls it, was power. They explore various energy storage methods, including hypersonic flywheels, but a nuclear battery was considered pretty much the only way to go. This immediately sent a shiver down my spine. While these small nuclear batteries have existed since the 1950s, small enough for a cell phone, apparently, the question of how dangerous it is for human beings to be constantly exposed to one, even with lead shielding, is quite unsettling. We're talking about potential horrible bone cancer. This brings a grim reality to the idea of a super soldier. At what cost does this power come? And this leads us to the most chilling aspect. What happens when the suit fails and you're still inside it? Beck, understanding this danger, pushed for designs that would allow movement even without power, using pneumatics or maybe springs. But the direction they went was different. If the power goes off, you're frozen. A 1,000-pound steel coffin. My personal opinion here is that this is incredibly irresponsible. The idea that a solar flare or simple battery failure could turn a highly advanced soldier into a helpless, immobile target is a profound and terrifying flaw in the concept. It underscores a recurring theme in our conversation about war, the constant push for technological advantage, often at the expense of the individual soldier's safety or humanity.
Think so, with weapons?
Because the stuff I was working on 10 and 15, 20 years ago, and how fast we're advancing back then. So I would walk into a place and it'd be a chip manufacturer for us to do our sneaky peeky bugs and stuff. And I would show them, I'd say, hey, this is what we're working with right now. And then we would give them $3 million, make it half that size. And that's all we would do, to say, here's $3 million, half the size.
Really?
And then within 6 months, I'd give it to us, here, half the size. And so when we were doing it, and for my budget, I think I had like $60 million. So, and it's huge budgets when you get to top levels of the SEALs. And we really push it, and we're constantly pushing these envelopes of technology. And so you can kind of see, like, even when I was there, I know the sizes. And I know, like, you can have a chip, and you have a chip inside of a chip, and a chip and a chip and a chip. So you can go all these layers, all this stuff, you start digging. And then every time you have the chip, there's a lot of subroutines, sub-programs, and everything else you can put into them it's just mind-blowing how advanced we are. So when you say, do we have autonomous right now, we have airplanes, vehicles, we have all of it already.
Wow.
We're fully capable right now to go almost autonomous in warfare.
Crazy. Yeah. Do you think they'll develop like a humanoid type robot, or do you think they'll keep everything to that? You know, they have that sort of dog-shaped one that you see, the four-legged one.
Yeah.
It seems like that would maybe have some advantages in terms of maneuverability with the four legs.
Yeah, with carrying those heavy loads, and those are just mules, so those are only going to bring us equipment back and forth.
You don't think they'll use those to shoot guns?
Oh yeah, we already have guns on those.
Really?
Yeah, they're already gunned up. Yeah, they probably won't show a lot of the guns on those things.
And so when you would operate that,
everybody.
you could operate that remotely and it'd just be connected by satellite or something like that?
By whatever connection you can, yeah, satellite or even long range, HF. But you hook it up and you have your eye reticle. And then that's directly eye reticle with the sight and everything in it to the robot with the gun on it. So wherever I'm looking at, the gun is going.
No.
So I can look and I can see what he's looking at, I can see what I'm looking at, and then put them both over each other and then take my shots from the robot or myself.
This, to me, is the true moral hazard of this kind of technological arms race. It speaks to a dehumanizing trend where the individual becomes a component in a larger system, stripped of their agency and potentially their very life if that system fails. While some elements are useful today, like exoskeletons for load carrying or helping paralyzed people walk, the ultimate goal remains a full armored Iron Man suit. 23 petrified soldiers. Joe Rogan shares an unsettling story with Post Malone during episode 2018 of his podcast, one that blurs the line between historical mystery and science fiction horror. He begins reading from a CIA file, said to be based on original KGB materials, detailing an alleged alien encounter in the Soviet Union that led to the petrification, literally, of 23 soldiers.
Mars for a buzzword.
What do you think about all this UFO disclosure shit? Are you paying attention to it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's I think it's pretty cool.
It's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? Like how little people seem to care.
Because we already know.
I know, but it's interesting that like there wasn't like some moment where people like were like, holy shit, aliens are real.
Pretty soon that's coming.
You think? I think it's good because this slow trickle, it's going to be, we just accept it.
Well,
According to the documents, the incident took place in Siberia, where a low-flying saucer-shaped craft appeared above a Soviet military unit conducting a routine training exercise. Without warning or clear authorization, one of the soldiers launched a surface-to-air missile at the object. The missile struck its target, causing the UFO to crash nearby. From the wreckage, 5 short beings reportedly emerged. They were described as humanoids with large heads and dark, oversized eyes. The 2 surviving soldiers claimed that these figures regrouped and, in an eerie and almost ceremonial act, merged into a single sphere-shaped form. This fusion triggered an intense buzzing and hissing, which quickly escalated into a blinding white light. Within seconds, the glowing sphere expanded rapidly and exploded with a force that left 23 soldiers standing nearby turned into what appeared to be stone statues, frozen in place like ash-coated figures at Pompeii. The only reason the 2 survivors lived, the report claims, is because they were standing in the shade and were partially shielded from the blast.
Try to normalize it with like War of the Worlds, which is like the War of the or Battle of Los Angeles and shit like that. That was a real fucking thing that happened. The pictures of Battle Los Angeles is crazy.
What happened exactly?
There's this big object in the sky, and we're shooting machine guns at it. We got spotlights. This is like in the 50s, maybe?
I remember seeing it. There's this photo.
Look at this shit.
Wow.
So we're putting fucking rounds on this fucking thing.
Spotlights on this thing in the sky.
Look at the rounds.
Right, but what is it? What is it that they see? That's weird that all you can see is spotlights.
1947, it says in the corner.
Boy, that looks like a fucking flying saucer.
Look at in the middle and look at, but those things around it, those are fucking like Ma Deuce rounds. Like they're shooting at this fucking thing. They don't know what it is.
Well, you know that there's a famous story from the Soviet Union that these guys shot at a UFO and it turned them into stone.
Is it true?
I don't know. The CIA investigated it. Here, I'll send it to you.
When Rogan reads from a classified CIA document, which was only a fragment of a 250-page dossier, the weight of what's withheld becomes more interesting than what's revealed. The document's ominous conclusion, warning that if true, the implications are deeply disturbing, does more than validate the story's weirdness. It opens a larger philosophical can of worms. What level of evidence do we really need before we're forced to rethink everything? The idea that these things, whoever or whatever they are, could retaliate decisively if threatened is especially chilling. It reframes the conversation from "do aliens exist?" to "what are the geopolitical and existential stakes if they do, and they're not friendly?" This flips the typical UFO curiosity on its head. It's no longer a question of fascination, but of readiness. Are we as a species equipped, ethically, technologically, psychologically, to handle something with that kind of power? The answer, most would agree, is no.
That these guys supposedly shot at a low-flying spaceship. Look at it. According to the KGB materials, a quite low-flying spaceship in the shape of a saucer appeared above a military unit that was conducting routine training maneuvers. For unknown reasons, somebody unexpectedly launched a surface-to-air missile and hit the UFO. It fell to Earth not far away, and 5 short humanoids with large heads and large black eyes emerged from it. It is stated in the testimonies by the 2 soldiers who remained alive that after freeing themselves from the debris, the aliens came close together and then merged into a single object that acquired a spherical shape. That object began to buzz and hiss sharply and then became brilliant white. In a few seconds, the spheres grew much bigger and exploded by flaring up with an extremely bright light. At that very instant, 23 soldiers who had watched the phenomenon turned into stone poles.
Poles?
Yeah, only 2 soldiers who stood in the shade and were less exposed to the luminous explosion survived.
No shit.
The KGB report goes on to say that the remains of the UFO and the petrified soldiers were transferred to a secret scientific research institution near Moscow. Specialists assumed that a source of energy that is still unknown to Earthlings instantly changed the structure of the soldiers' living organisms, having transformed it into a substance whose molecular composition is no different from that of limestone. Oh my God.
It turned them into limestone.
Turned them literally into limestone.
And this is a CIA paperwork?
Well, this is, they're reading from a KGB file, right? So it's just... Go to the very bottom of that again, Jamie, the very bottom of that. It says one of the things that says, the CIA representative stated, if the KGB file corresponds to reality, this is an extremely menacing case. The aliens possess such weapons and technology that go beyond all our assumptions. They can stand up for themselves if attacked. But the thing is, they're saying if the file corresponds to reality, that means there's a question.
If this is real, they're tough.
Yeah, they can fuck with you.
What year was this released?
Shadow of Nuclear War. In episode 1880, former Congresswoman and Army veteran Tulsi Gabbard delivered a truly chilling revelation about the future of conflict, a vision far more insidious than any traditional invasion. She warns us that the next war might not begin with a visible threat. It might start with a vote, a contract, or a budget passed in silence. By the time you realize who the true enemy is, they'll be safe underground, while you're left facing a disaster you never saw coming. This immediately resonated with me, highlighting a profound shift in how conflicts are initiated, making it incredibly difficult to pinpoint accountability. Gabbard dives deep into the military-industrial complex, MIC, exposing it as massive defense corporations that rake in immense profits from war or even just the threat of it. What's truly unsettling is her assertion that military spending decisions aren't primarily about national security needs. Instead, they're often the result of cozy relationships between defense contractors, their lobbyists, and members of Congress.
They're not covering that.
It's like this chummy insiders club in Washington. And, a common term that's being used now is called permanent Washington, which really fits when you think about it, because it kind of encapsulates that whole swampy ecosystem of both those who've been elected into positions, those who are longtime appointed or powerful bureaucrats, and the corporate media. They all go out to the same parties, the same social functions, passing information to each other. And so, if the anchor of a big time news show says, hey guys, guess what? Nancy Pelosi and her husband are insider trading, then they have to think about, oh, well, am I burning a bridge? Am I cutting off access to, information that she or her staff might be feeding me that I can break news on, and all this stuff. So, it's like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And if you start pissing off certain people, then you get kicked out of the cool kids club. That's really what's at the heart of it. And so they play along, because this issue's come up before. It came up years ago. Congress said, okay, we're going to take action to stop insider trading and make sure that elected leaders aren't benefiting off of insider information. And so they passed the Stock Act, which did nothing. Essentially, it just said, okay, if you are going to, trade in stocks or buy or sell stocks, you have to report it. You have to be transparent about it. Most of Congress has failed to do even that. So it did nothing to stop it. It says, you just got to tell us. And most people are like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you anyway.
And there's no repercussions?
And there's well, they might get like a $100 fine, $200 fine.
My take here is that this is a devastating indictment of a system where human lives and global stability are secondary to corporate balance sheets. It's truly disheartening that when profits drive policies, war becomes a business, not a last resort. The bipartisan nature of this problem is particularly infuriating. Despite deep divisions on almost every other issue, both parties seem united in their support for continuous conflict funding. When both sides cash the same checks, who's left to say no? This grim reality, Gabbard explains, is playing out in Ukraine, which she describes as a proxy war. The US and some European countries are pouring billions into funding and weapon systems, effectively using Ukraine military personnel and citizens as chess pieces in a geopolitical game aimed at regime change with Russia. The rhetoric used to justify this, she argues, is designed to foment fear in people's mind, rather than being rooted in reality. This kind of calculated manipulation is deeply disturbing, exploiting genuine anxieties for strategic or financial gain.
The Republican Party had, I think it was 50 members of Congress voted against that massive multi-billion-dollar funding package for Ukraine, and have been saying, hey, we shouldn't be waging this proxy war against Russia, or at least we need to have a debate or accountability. 0 Democrats voted against that. So you look at, the Democratic Party that used to have people who, protested the Vietnam War and others. Now, the Democratic Party leadership is very strongly within the grips of the military-industrial complex and advocating for more war, and you have more Republicans. And I think even Trump, this was Trump's instinct when he ran for president and he was president, was like, hey, we shouldn't be going and being the policeman of the world. We shouldn't be going around the world and starting all these wars. I think the problem with him was he surrounded himself with people who held a diametrically opposed view. Mike Pompeo, Nikki Haley, John Bolton, people who never saw a war they didn't like and advocated for. So there's movement. There's movement happening within the Democratic Party. Leadership is going crazy. I think the Republican Party is, I don't know, I think they're trying to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah, I think if they had someone like Ron DeSantis, who seems to be the most reasonable amongst the potential candidates, he seems to be, a pretty no-nonsense guy, not without his flaws, but he's more reasonable than anything that I'm seeing on the left.
Yeah.
At least with the way he handled COVID.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, as it's all playing out, there's this sense of hopelessness, because there's not a clearly defined path where this country's ship gets righted. It's like I just see a lot of chaos and a lot of confusion and a lot of infighting, and I don't know how this...
The most terrifying part of this discussion, however, is the stark warning that this situation has pushed us over the precipice of nuclear war, closer than ever before. Gabbard highlights the increasing dangerous rhetoric from Russian leaders about using nuclear weapons, and she's unequivocal. There is no way to win this. It would mean destruction of the world as we know it. And this is not just a theoretical threat. It's a chilling, imminent danger. The relentless dive to prolong the conflict is undeniably tied to the MIC's profit motive. The dangerous belief in mutual assured destruction, MAD, is being tested, especially given Russia's changed nuclear policy, allowing use in response to any existential threat, and Putin potentially feeling boxed into a corner with nothing else to lose. And this is a terrifying gamble.
It seems like part of the problem is that attack style of politics works. Like, just think about someone saying, oh, she's crazy. Like, okay, how is she crazy? But that's a narrative, and it gets out there because they attacked you. So, like, that stuff works. That's what's unfortunate, is that instead of, to make it, like, if there was an incentive to say, these are our plans, and this is how we can implement this, and just ignore negativity on the other side.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do, and I think that we are the best hope for the American people moving forward.
Yeah. You know, when I was running for president at town halls that we held across the country, it didn't really matter where we were, whether it was a small town or a big city, middle America, East Coast, West Coast. One of the ththat one of the media embedded reporters that would, kind of follow us around everywhere we went, made an observation that I thought was pretty awesome. This reporter said, gosh, I go to all these different campaign and candidate events. Yours is the only one where people walk out feeling hopeful and feeling inspired. And we had Democrats, Republicans, and independents and libertarians at every single one of those. And it was because we talked about different issues. We talked about, the threat of nuclear war. We talked about this new Cold War, the dangers of continuing down this path. We talked about things education. We talked about how we actually talked about these things. Most days, I never brought up Trump. Because why? I'm running and I'm asking you, hey, let me have the opportunity to serve you, and here's what we will do. Whereas with these other candidates, these other Democrat candidates who were running, people left angry. And that was their only goal, was like, hey, how many lines against Trump can we use that we know are going to piss people off and motivate them through anger and fear rather than through hope and inspiration for what we can do together as a...
The Infiltrated Nation. Up next, Joe's conversation with John McPhee in episode 2238 isn't just talking about threats. He's pulling back the curtain on a truly terrifying reality that most of us are either oblivious to or actively ignoring. When he asserts that if cartels launched a full-scale war on U.S. soil, it wouldn't be a massacre, but it'd be a match. It's just not a bold claim. It's a gut punch. This isn't hyperbole from some armchair general. This is a special operations veteran telling us that these aren't your grandpa's street gangs. No, these are well-funded, heavily armed, embedded in government armies. Armies, people. My immediate thought, we're so busy looking for foreign enemies, we're missing the ones that have already set up camp. And if you're thinking, oh, our elite special forces will just roll in and clean house, McPhee has a blunt reality check for you. He knows his buddies might say something like, yeah, we'll fuck them up in a night. But he's quick to retort, fucking let's back up a fucking second here. The cartels aren't some ragtag bunch. They have men, they own the ground, and they have technical skills. They have machine guns. They have everything an army has. And get this, they've had decades to train, waiting for this. Decades. While we've been focused on deserts overseas, these guys have been building, planning, and waiting right on our doorstep. This isn't a fight. It's a deeply entrenched, asymmetrical nightmare.
What do you think about this idea of using special forces guys to fight the cartels? This is
first and foremost, like if you were like, yo, we're gonna wipe out a cartel tonight, I'd have been like, I'll load my frags extra careful, like let's go, right? But the reality is like, I know all my buddies are like, yeah, we'll fuck them up in a night, we'll fucking fucking let's back up a fucking second here. The cartels have fucking men. They own the ground. They have fucking technicals. They have machine guns. They have fucking everything an army has. Right? And they've had decades to train waiting for this. Number 2. And number 3, our government's fucking compromised. So if you think they ain't gonna know you're coming, you know what I mean? I think you're fucking high.
Jesus Christ, that's a terrifying thought. The government's so compromised, the cartel's going to get the word out before.
Well, how are we going to... Look, we're not good at being fucking sneaky. We're not the Israelis doing that fucking pager shit.
That
you know
pager
what I'm saying?
shit was wild.
Yo, that needs to be the model for every fucking thing we do in the future.
No matter what you think about the Israelis, what's going on in Gaza, that pager shit was wild.
Which tells me America should go back to making its own fucking cell phones and its own... We shouldn't have our fucking comms made overseas at all in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion.
No, I've been saying that forever. We should have our own cell phones.
Fuck.
And the fact that we're buying so much shit from China.
Fuck.
Especially after they banned Huawei because they know that Huawei stuff was compromised and they're having third-party input and being able to spy on people.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
Well, this is why we got to go back to making America like it used to be. We made our own shit. We use our own shit. We wouldn't have to worry about
It implies that the true battleground isn't just on the streets. It's in the quiet, insidious infiltration of our own institutions. This means the scariest battles aren't fought with bombs. They're buried in memos disguised as strategy, signed behind closed doors. It's a chilling thought that the enemy might already be sitting at the table. McPhee hammers this home with terrifying examples of foreign cities, like China, being allowed to buy land that's near military bases and supplying cell phone towers that are literally scooping up everybody's data. He recounts a story about Chinese boxes attached to Wi-Fi at a racetrack, siphoning data, prompting Homeland Security involvement. It's fucking crazy and goofy how we allow this, especially when countries like China would never let an American company operate with such freedom or buy land near their military bases. It reveals a level of almost suicidal naivety on our part. The danger isn't just their firepower, it's their invisibility. When the enemy wears no uniform, answers to no flag, and moves within our borders like smoke, the war has already started. Most people just haven't noticed yet.
Zero. Mike Baker was on here and he was telling me about how around military bases like China has installed their equipment in all these military bases. Like at Formula One, where we were, my buddy owns the track and they found these Chinese boxes that they had attached to the Wi-Fi. So they were just scooping up everybody's data. They called in Homeland Security to have them remove it and investigate it.
fucking racetrack.
A racetrack, but they knew everybody was going to be using this public Wi-Fi. Probably no VPNs, probably no security, and these people are getting all their shit siphoned up.
Fuck.
They're so sophisticated in how they've infiltrated. It's fucking crazy.
And we just allow it to happen.
It's very strange because you can't buy shit in China. If you think you're an American company, you're going to go over to China and operate with autonomy, you're out of your fucking mind.
Yeah.
You can't buy shit.
Yeah, they'll never let an American...
Never.
No, they don't want... Chinese would never buy communication devices from America.
No, and they certainly would never let America buy farmland right next to their military bases. They'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
We're like, sure, we'll sell it to you. Are you going to pay more?
Yeah.
Oh, boy. We'll take your money.
Fucking...
It's weird. It's weird how goofy we are.
I know. And then, I think it's this, Joe. I think people don't realize how fucking dangerous the rest of the world is and how, people are, plotting against us. And it's fucking real out there. The world is a crazy place. I say this. You don't know how fucking safe you got it here and how fucking great we got it here. You know what I mean?
Right.
People don't know that because they don't never leave here, so they're stuck in their own fucking bad attitude of, their own grind or whatever the fuck they do. And look, I'm telling you, the world is fucking evil. People will fucking rape you, kill you. No one gives a fuck. protect yourself all the time.
Well,
man.
you've been to parts of the world where you've seen this firsthand, and I think it's one of those things where if you don't see it, you don't believe it.
Yeah. I'll tell you I think the biggest thing I saw in Iraq, I think in maybe 2009-ish, there was like the most fucking U.S. soldiers ever been in Iraq, right? Like, whatever the numbers are, I don't fucking know, right? But when Iraq had the most fucking soldiers it has ever had in Iraq is when Iraq was the safest. Think about it. You know what I mean? All we had to do was put a fucking tank under every fucking overpass. In every fucking neighborhood, there's a machine gun and a fucking 50 cal Humvee, right? Like, who's fucking around? They're everywhere.
He then shifts to a more immediate domestic concern, arguing that if we defund the police, we'd be Mexico quicker than we thought. He draws a vivid, albeit stark, parallel to Iraq, noting that it was safest when it had the most fucking soldiers, with a fucking tank under every fucking overpass. This paints a picture where overwhelming, visible force is the only true deterrent to chaos. This resonates with the often unspoken truth Andy Stumpf hinted in an episode 1247, that some wars aren't worth fighting twice, because the reality is far uglier than we can imagine.
If we defunded the police, we'd be Mexico quicker than we thought.
Yeah, right.
Because the cartels will just drive over the border.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah.
Kabul's fall. In episode 1833, Green Beret and UFC fighter Tim Kennedy unleashes a narrative about the fall of Kabul that doesn't just feel like history. It feels like a waking nightmare you wish you could escape. He paints a horrific picture of mothers throwing their babies over barbed wire at Kabul airport, not in wild desperation, but in a calculated, agonizing choice, believing it offered a better chance at survival. This isn't just a story, it's a stark, brutal testament to the collapse of humanity, where survival becomes a prayer thrown through razor wire, and for some, the only choice left is the unthinkable.
So they are definitely doing their thing, but it was the desperation of the people trying to find a way to live. So at each of these gates, a NEO operation, it's a non-combatant evacuation operation. It's a military operation if a NEO takes place. They keep calling it a NEO, but that's if the military ran it. And if the military ran it, you would see, a special forces unit with a big, like the Ranger Regiment or 82nd Airborne that come in, that build this huge exterior perimeter, that control the ground strategically. Then it would be like the clockwork of a military operation as planes are coming in and planes are coming out, and we're building manifests, we're confirming that everybody that goes on the plane are the right people. This was not a NEO. This was run by the State Department. So instead of that, think a big strategic military operation, instead of think the airport became an embassy. And like in the movies, you're running the embassy, and if you get in, you're safe, and then they'll get you out. That's how they started treating HKIA, the airport in Kabul, as an embassy. So the military just secured the perimeter of the embassy, the airport, and anybody that got on the airport was able to get out. Except the military wasn't allowed to go outside of the airport, so all the people in the city of Kabul were stuck. That's where we had to come in. So we had to go out into Kabul and grab the people and then smuggle them past the Taliban to get them onto planes. And to answer your question, that perimeter of the base where the gates, there's tens of thousands of people that were lining up here, and they maybe walked a few days. So by the time they get there, they're dehydrated. They have nothing there. There's no food. There's no water. The Taliban, if there's too many people, they'll just take a magazine and just dump it into the crowd to move them back, or to like crowd control them. They'll just dump a magazine into a crowd of people. The women, they would float babies like you're at a baseball game with a beach ball. They would float the baby towards the gate, and then hope in the hopes that a Marine or a soldier would reach down and grab the baby and bring it into safety.
And what truly grates my gears, and what Kennedy underscores, is the infuriating sense of strategic blindness at the highest level. Kennedy, with over 20 deployments, states emphatically that he and all his peers fully forecasted what was going to happen as soon as the U.S. started pulling back and collapsing their ground. Every inch given up, they knew the Taliban would take. They gave up strategic military bases like Kandahar and Bagram, effectively handing over the rest of the country. This wasn't some unforeseen black swan event. It was a predicted, catastrophic failure. Political decisions and bureaucratic inertia can be as devastating as enemy fire. The scariest battles aren't fought with bombs. They're buried in memos disguised as strategy, signed behind closed doors. Kabul was a prime example of this.
Yeah, with 20-something deployments overseas, I've never seen anything like Afghanistan during the fall of Afghanistan. I don't know who was at a strategic level not anticipating that the Taliban, every time that we moved an inch on the ground, that the Taliban would not move an inch on the ground. So myself and all of my peers, all my colleagues, fully forecasted what was going to happen. So as soon as we started collapsing that ground, there was no doubt in any of our minds that every inch of ground that we gave up was ground that the Taliban was going to take. So when we gave up, Kandahar and Bagram, the two strategic military bases, that means that we just gave up the rest of the country. And we, having been at war there for 20 years and, multiple trips over there, we have lots of friends that deployed with us there. The Afghans have a special operations unit called the Commandos. We worked alongside them. Our interpreters are obviously from Afghanistan, so they live in Afghanistan, but they work for us. These people have security clearances. They love the idea of democracy and freedom. They love the idea of a free, independent Afghanistan. They want their daughters to be educated, and those ideals, that philosophy, does not align with the Taliban. So as Taliban start taking over Afghanistan, my phone just starts exploding from all of my friends and asking me to go, contracting companies saying, hey, I'll pay you 10 grand a day to go grab this guy. But none of it was altruistic, none of it was the right call to action. It was lots of people. Yes, it was going to go and save life, but it was for money. And I was just waiting for, I don't know what I was waiting for. I wasted 2 days trying to figure out what is the right thing to do.
The true heartbreak lies with the Afghans who stood with us, the commandos, the interpreters, those who embraced the idea of democracy, freedom, and education for their daughters. Their ideals do not align with the Taliban. For them, the collapse wasn't just a headline. It was a profound betrayal of trust and a crushing blow to their futures. While the government stalled, Kennedy found his moral compass not in official orders, but in a phone call. He recounts how Chad Robichaux, a Marine Special Operations guy, called him to help Aziz, a translator whose family was explicitly threatened and whose friends were being murdered by the Taliban. This led to the formulation of Save Our Allies, a non-government organization, NGO, started by Kennedy, co-author Nick Palmasciano and Sarah Verardo. It's a powerful counter-narrative to government paralysis, showing that sometimes rescue doesn't start with orders, but with the urgency and conviction from veterans, spouses, and friends. In just 10 days, his ground team of 4 and 12 total in the Middle East moved an astonishing 12,000 people out of Afghanistan, accounting for 11% of everyone evacuated during that desperate period.
To fix any of that, it just seems to be like we're just going to complain about it, and it's going to be chaotic until the Chinese take over.
Don't say that. Why would you say that, Joe? Take that back. Take that back.
Well, they already got John Cena. Once they got John Cena, I was
we're
like,
already
my God.
The same group that obviously was in Afghanistan, Save Our Allies. Did you read about Benji Hall?
No.
So he was a journalist with Fox News that got blown up in Ukraine, and a couple of journalists that were with him died, and he was horrifically injured. Our organization, Save Our Allies, was the group that went in and found him, rescued him, saved his life, and then got him out of Ukraine and into American level medical care, and then all the way, he's currently in BAMC, like right here in San Antonio. And first, it is so cool that journalists are brave like that to go and to go into Kabul, to go into Ukraine, to go down to the border, and to see what is really happening down there. So like little nod to them, and but that guy, no painkiller after he is very, very seriously injured. His family haven't seen the wounds, so like I'm not going to explain them, but tourniquets on for hours, and he has to make it through all these checkpoints, and this is like peak invasion, and they're able to get him out of Ukraine and save his life. And like that ground team from Save Our Allies that was so creative, and how they literally went into the front lines, grabbed this journalist, dead bodies around him, got him medical care, and then got him out of the country and before he died. And that Benji Hall, you're a badass.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty rad.
There's a lot of badasses out there. As much as we want to talk about people that are fat and lazy and soft in this country, there is a large number of fucking incredible human beings that are here.
I'm surrounded by them. I talk about wanting America to be more healthy and fitter and stronger and individually responsible and able to secure a school, be able to protect your kids. I fully believe that we need to be better, and we're the weakest that we've ever been. But I'm like surrounded by, in the military, in my position there, I'm just surrounded by the best and most brilliant men that have ever existed. Like, these guys are so incredible. And then the guys that I work with at Sheepdog Response, their heart as servants, teaching teachers, teaching law enforcement, teaching civilians that just want to be better mothers and fathers to be able to protect themselves and their families. Like, how rad is it that they've dedicated their whole entire lives to this idea? Like, they'll teach 14-hour days, they'll come back into the office, start cleaning all the weapons, start cleaning the mats, mopping, sanitizing, to do it all again the next day. And it's so humbling to see how many great humans there are out there, and we so often just like focus at the bad, at the expense of the good never being recognized.
But the image he describes from the ground are etched into your soul. What looked like a semblance of an assembly line on television was way worse on the ground. This wasn't a standard military non-combat evacuation operation, NEO, with clockwork precision. It was run by the state government, treating the airport like an embassy, with the military confined to the perimeter. This meant tens of thousands of dehydrated people trapped outside, while the Taliban used brutal crowd control, literally dumping a magazine into a crowd of people. Kennedy recalls stepping over babies in water or seeing a small body that's on fire that was burnt alive by the Taliban. He recounts seeing Taliban execute a female journalist on the hood of a car in front of his team, powerless to intervene. This isn't a war story. It's a collapse of humanity.
Break anything down. When you're running out the wire to grab a family and come back in, you don't really have time to think about what you're stepping over, but you still see it. And that's the thing that tortures my mind, is I still saw it all, but I didn't have the time to address it emotionally, think about this dead body I'm stepping over, because I'm really busy trying to get to this family. And then when I get to this family and I confirm, we had to be really judicious in how we confirmed who the people were. If I brought back one person that wasn't the right person to bring back, I would consider myself a failure in the whole.
This level of chaos, ignored or misrepresented, makes John McPhee's warnings from episode 2238 about the nature of modern threats all the more chilling. The notion that our government is compromised and that the enemy's danger is their invisibility resonates deeply with the chaotic reality of Kabul. What Kennedy witnessed was a war already started within a perceived safe zone, much like McPhee's claim that most people just haven't noticed yet that the war is already here. The desolation in Kabul is a brutal blueprint for what happens when the enemy wears no uniform, answers to no flag, and moves within borders like smoke. If your mind is still spinning from these crazy Nazi and war stories, you are not alone. Hit that like button, smash subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss more insane moments like the scariest true crime confessions ever made on Joe Rogan's podcast that sound too wild to be real. Got a favorite Rogan moment we haven't covered yet? Drop it in the comments. We're watching, and trust me, there are more stories to tell. I'm Mickey V. Have a great day.